Before my life in crime, I never believed that a man or group of people could sit together and conspire to rob, blackmail, kidnap, murder or commit other acts of felony. But now I know. I am about 30, as I write this book. I was born on February 14, 1950 and I was imprisoned on January 6, 1971. So 8 of those years have been wasted in prison. I still have others ahead of me. The judge who sentenced me knew exactly what he was doing. I always think in his life, he had never heard of the word mercy, and if he had, he did not care what the hell it meant. I was born to a relatively well-to-do family. My father, Albert KIRIAMITI, and my mother, Anne Wanjarug, were teachers, and therefore in my youth, I was well provided for. I completed my primary education in Thuita School. Thuita School is in Mirange, about 15 miles from the town. In the lower primary my mother was one of the teachers and I'll say I never enjoyed it because she used to beat me so hard that I often thought of escaping from school. As a mother, she was very sweet but I never brought myself to believe that she was the same woman when we went to school. When I went to the upper primary, I was glad to know that I would no longer be in her class. In 1963 after I had passed my KAPE, I went to St. Mary's Secondary School in Mirange town. I never liked the school and before the end of my first year, I applied for a place at New Nairobi High School, later renamed St. Mark's High School. I did not care what kind of a school it was, all I wanted was to be in Nairobi. If only I knew Nairobi would turn me into a helpless person I would have hated the look of it for good as I now do. My brother Sammy who had caught up with me in primary school was also in Nairobi, at the Prince of Wales School. He was a boarder but I was a day student, so mother took me to stay with her brother in Bahati. After 2 years in secondary school, I did my KJSE and got good results. I did not want to go back to school but since I did not have anything else to do, I was forced by circumstances to go back. In 1965, before the end of the 3rd year, I was expelled from school for taking part in a strike. I was the ringleader and so I was expelled with my followers. I never reported this to my parents, since I needed the money they gave me for school fees and the daily bus fare I got from my uncle. I would therefore wake up early as usual, taking my bag and bus fare, and I would go to town. Sometimes I was given money to eat out and sometimes I would go home for lunch. It would have worked out all right, or so I thought, if my brother Sammy had not interfered. I think he became jealous of the fact that I was fitting myself better with my school fees. I have told you of that part of my uncle since I always think that it was the cause of all my troubles. I was then used to town life, going from this nightclub to the other and I was sure there was nothing better in life except maybe the movies. I do not know even today how my brother came to know about all this but he knew. He wrote home and informed my parents without my knowledge. They must have written to my uncle to tell him they would come, for as I came to work out later, he knew they were coming. My aunt was not aware for she would have told me since we were on very good terms. She had arrived a week before my parents. One bright Saturday morning, my uncle told me not to go out to town. He said he would come back soon and wanted a word with me. I should have guessed then but I didn't. At about 12 my mother arrived, at 4 o'clock my father arrived with my brother Sammy. I was not surprised to see them for they used to make such visits at least once every month. In the evening when we had all taken our supper, my father started. We were all seated around the table discussing one thing or other. He said, "How are you doing in school, young boys?" I said I was doing well. Brother Sammy said he was doing well too. "You look very bright these days, Jack, very smart too. Seems as if your uncle spares you a lot of pocket money." I did not answer him and neither did the phrase surprise me as it had been said to me several times since I left school. After a short silence, he turned to me again. I did not want to meet his eyes for if I did so, I would not be able to talk myself out of his many tricks. "Jack, I don't see why we should beat around the bush. I know as well as you do that you are no longer in school. For almost 1 year, you have cheated me off a handful of money intended for your school fees. Anyway, I will forget about that, but your foolish tricks have come to a brick wall. Now tell me, why did you leave school? I was expelled, I said. I knew the game was up. I knew too that he had not come there to persuade me to go back to school but to take me home back to the reserve, a place I had come to hate. Why were you expelled? He asked me. They said that I had engineered a strike because we were not getting enough textbooks and fees were high, but I was not involved. Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep on asking me for your school fees if you are as good as you pretend to be? I would have taken you to another school or found you something better to do. Now you have wasted a lot of my money for nothing. He was now very annoyed. I was afraid he would start something worse, but the fact that there were many people restrained him. Anyway, you know the penalty, he continued. Pack everything you have, for at this time tomorrow, you will be at home. For the first time since my father started talking, someone else spoke. It was my uncle. Jack, say something. I never thought there would be a time you'd have nothing to say. Persuade your father not to take you home. You know I want you around here. Since you came I feel my house is more secure even when I am out. I was very annoyed, for I knew he was mocking me. I knew he liked me as much as he liked a rattlesnake beside him in bed. I knew he wanted me as far away from his house as possible, only he could not be frank enough to say so. I therefore turned to him and said, Look here Tom, do not think even for 1 second that you'll be able to cheat me and these people. I know as well as you do that you don't like me. I have been standing between you and a lot of things you have always wanted to do. I realized this the day I came home earlier than my usual time, only to find the door locked from the inside. You have now forgotten the way you behaved when I saw the girl you had brought home. That girl who sells Kenya charity sweepstake tickets on Government Road. I said that to let the others know that not only did I know that he brought women home, but that I also knew which women. Not that that was the particular girl who was then with him, but I wanted my accusations to have some weight. I also knew how harsh his wife was, especially where other women were concerned, so I continued, You also seem to have forgotten the other one who came and... My mother here interfered by telling me to behave myself and not show off in front of them, but before she managed to quieten me completely, my aunt jumped in. She seemed to think that my mother was defending her brother, and she told her that if she did not mind her husband fooling about with other women, my aunt did, and that it was her business if... There was a lot of noise as the men joined in, each telling his wife to hold her tongue. I was smiling broadly, and for the first time since we had started talking, I felt happy. When all was quiet, I stood up and looked at all surrounding the table. I then looked at the photos on the picture rail on the wall. I stared at each as if it were my first time to see them. I looked at my brother once more and I hated him. I then went to the window, drew the curtains a little bit, and looked outside. I saw a bus come to a stop, pick up some people and drop some. This is what town life is like, I thought, and went back to my seat. I was very quiet and did not say anything. As I sat down I forced a cough, wondering what would be next. I was well aware that this would be my last day in Nairobi as long as I was to stay under my parents' rule. I also knew that I had spoiled everything. Even if I escaped from home after being taken there, Tom would not accommodate me even for a night. I therefore pulled myself together and prepared for the worst. I came to a conclusion that even if I went home, I would go back to Nairobi with or without their consent. We did not talk more that night, and after a time we all went to bed. I tried to sleep but I could not. I had so many thoughts in my mind. But eventually I fell asleep. I woke up very late the following day. I did not want to talk to anybody, so I took my box and started packing. By 12 o'clock that day we were at the Makakos bus stop waiting for a bus to Murange. I did not give a damn, for I was doing all that to please them. A day or two after arriving home, I would board another bus for Nairobi. At home, I was welcomed by my young brothers and sisters. They were very happy to see me. They did not seem to know that it was not through my wish that I was at home. They were only very glad that I would be with them. It was not too long before the schools closed and I was joined by other students of my village from various secondary schools. Then life at home was not very bad. We held many dance parties. It was also a pleasure to go out in groups hunting for dames at night. The cash I had saved, about 300 shillings, and that type of life persuaded me to stay at home for about a month. When time came for reopening schools, I was among the group that boarded the bus at Thuada shopping center. I had not told anyone that I would go. I decided I would write to them when I got settled. When we reached Murang'a, many students alighted there. I also alighted and boarded a Peugeot for Nairobi. I did not even tell my brother where I was off to. Within 2 hours I was back in Nairobi. And within the next 2, trouble struck. My box containing all my belongings disappeared. That left me with only the clothes I was wearing and 600 shillings that I had taken from my father's coat. This is how it happened. When I alighted from the Peugeot at Tea Room Hotel, I took my box and went towards the OTC bus terminal. That is the place where I used to pass time while I was at school. I had not decided where I would search for accommodation. But I knew that wherever I went and was known, I would get accommodation for a day. I was well aware that relying on anyone to accommodate me for a week would be expecting too much. I put my box down and sat on a form in the waiting room. I was not new in Nairobi, but I looked like a stranger. After resting for about 30 minutes, I left my box and went out. I was carried away by my thoughts. Then I remembered just in time that I had left my box behind. When I went in, I found a smartly dressed boy, almost my age, sitting right where I had been sitting. I did not become suspicious. He greeted me cheerfully and I returned his greetings cheerfully too. "Is this your box?" he asked me. "Yes, it is mine. Are you new here? Next time, don't leave your box unattended. This is Nairobi and you can lose it any time if you don't take care. I am not new here. I stay in Bahati and I am on my way there. I just felt tired and thought of resting a little." "Our school is opening next week on Monday," I lied. "Which is your school?" he asked. "Nairobi School," I lied again. "I am also a student, from Parkland School," he told me. I could have believed him had he not tried to speak English. I decided that if he ever went to school, he did not go beyond Standard 7. He was clean and I liked him. We talked about this and that for some time until he decided that we should have some tea. He picked up my box and I followed him. He left it with a shoeshine boy at the door whom he talked to. I did not hear what he told him as I was some paces behind him. He then led me towards Kamangu Hotel. We took our seats and he ordered tea and some buttered toast. He got busy eating. After finishing, he ordered for 2 glasses of milk. He drank half a glass then stood up. He asked me to excuse him for a minute, to go for a short call on the opposite side of the entrance to the hotel. I knew where the toilets were and therefore, I was not suspicious. I continued with my glass of milk and the toast that was still on the plate. By the time I completed eating, I must have been there alone for more than 3 minutes. I instantly remembered the stories I had heard of people being tricked that way and stood up immediately, without even remembering that none of us had settled the bill. As I reached the door, I was grabbed from behind by an angry waiter. "Hey, young boy, what's the big idea? Do you want me to play rough with you right now?" "Sorry, I was in a hurry." I took out a £1 note and told him to deduct his dues. I was glad to see that he noticed I had more money in my wallet, lest he should think that I had been playing a game. "I'll come back for the change," I said and went out. When I reached where the shoeshine boy had been, I was surprised to see that the one we had left the box with was not the one who was sitting there. Moreover, the box was not where we had left it. "Where's the owner of the stand?" I asked the new man. "I am the owner." What do you want, and where is the man who was here about 10 minutes ago? No one has been here except me since morning. I don't share this stand with anyone. What is wrong? If you are the one who was here about 10 minutes ago, you are then the one we left my box with. Where is it then? Are you sure you left your box with me? Are you sure you know what you are talking about? I was scared. I knew that these town crooks were very tough. He started shouting at me and people started gathering. I did not want to make a scene. I tried to persuade him to lower his voice, but instead, he shouted even more loudly. He wanted a showdown, something I guess he knew I couldn't stand. What am I to do? I asked myself. Some of the people in the crowd were sympathetic. I tried to prove my innocence by saying I was a schoolboy. When they asked me whether he was really the man I had left my box with, I told them he was not, but the one we gave the box to was sitting there. I gave them the whole story. Some of them laughed and went away, and others advised me to call the police. That idea pleased me. I entered the booking room right at the corner and going to the telephone, dialed 999. A certain man approached me as I was dialing the number. He advised me to say that that was the man I had left my box with. He told me that if I said so, the man would agree to show the police the man who really went with my box. Hello, 999, a hard voice said. Can I help you? Yes, sir, I said. What is your problem? I am a schoolboy, sir, and I left my box with a certain shoeshine boy here and he has refused with it. Is that all? Yes, sir. Where are you? I am at the OTC booking office, sir. He is just at the front door, sitting on his stool. Okay, hang around and I'll send some policemen there in 2 minutes. Understand? Yes, sir. He hung up and I went out. There were people still around who knew what was going on. I could see that they were very curious to know what would happen. The man was still sitting where I had left him. He did not seem worried at all, even though he knew that I had been advised to call the police. He probably thought I would give the story just as I had given it to the crowd. If so, he was underrating me. I could tell by the scars on his face that he had known trouble. Everyone around was looking at me, telling me to give the story exactly as I had given it to them. Within a minute, I saw a police 999 car turning from Duke Street, now Ronald and Gala, to Racecourse Road. It stopped abruptly after passing the bus stop. 2 police officers jumped over the 3-foot-high fence and came straight to where we were. The crowd scattered and stood some distance away. I was left alone with my man. One of the policemen looked at me and asked, "Are you the boy who has just phoned the police?" "Yes, sir." "And is this the man you talked about?" he asked me, pointing with his forefinger at the shoeshine boy. "Yes, sir, he is the one," I said. "Okay, get up you." He got hold of the man by the collar and hauled him to his feet. The other one got hold of his right arm and twisted it until he cried in pain. One cop turned to me and told me to follow them. The shoeshine boy was thrown into the police car. He did not protest in any way. I entered the car too. I was asked whether there was any person among the crowd who saw me leave the box with that man. I told them the only person who was there was the shoeshine boy's customer and I did not know him. The other policeman said it was not necessary. In a minute, we were at Kamiakanji police station. Sometimes, even the oddest thing can turn out to be funny, I said to myself. Here is me, Jack, back in Nairobi, but this time on my own. Within 3 hours after leaving home, I'd lost my box. Within 4, I am seated in a police station writing a statement and giving a phony story, a story that has been hammered into my head by a stranger. Anyway, that was only the beginning. The Swahili say that what you are not taught by your parents, you'll be taught by the world. I think that was the time the world started teaching me, and it has really taught me. At the police station, the shoeshine boy was taken to the cells. I then gave my story to a police inspector who sympathized with me. The shoe shine boy was then called and asked to explain. He rejected my version of the story and said that I had given it differently from the way I had given it to the crowd at the OTC offices. He gave his own account but no one listened to him. He was then ushered into an inner room where I could hear him being worked on. He was beaten until he could not talk, but he stuck to his story. After some minutes, he was locked in the cells. I was asked for my address by the inspector and I gave a false one. I also gave a false name. By this time, I was convinced that I would not get my box back. I knew too that they were asking for my address so that they could later come for me to be a prosecution witness when the shoe shine boy was taken to court. I had no time for that. I did not even know where I would be by then. Later, they asked me if I would like them to take me to my uncle, but I said I was all right. I walked out of the office and out of the police station. That night, I slept in a lodging at the Small World nightclub, drunk and with a whore beside me for the first time. I spent about 100 shillings, including the 10 shillings I gave her the following morning. After washing myself, I went out to the shops and bought myself a new box and some clothes. After buying the lot, I had only 175 shillings left. How long will that push me? I wondered. For some months after finishing all the money I had, I really got into problems. I would sometimes get very hungry until once I thought of selling the clothes I had. When I went to a man who was selling second-hand clothes, he told me he would give 3 shillings for a shirt I had bought for over 30 shillings. When I asked him how much he would give me for my watch, which was worth 100 shillings, he said he would not give more than 7 shillings. I got annoyed and left him. I did not have a penny in my pockets and I had not eaten for almost 2 days. The previous night I had slept in the open. It made me remember the prodigal son. He, however, was better off. He had leaves to eat. But I had nothing except the stones on the roadside. Can you imagine someone swallowing a stone? I left Carriacre where I had gone to sell my clothes and went towards the town center. On my way, a beggar by the roadside stretched out his arms with much hope. I nearly hit him. He was better off than I was. He had the guts to beg. I did not, and I was even tempted to pick 30 cents from the ground, between his legs. Believe me, I nearly picked the money. I did not meet anybody who could have mercy upon a dying man. I did not even meet those I knew. All the faces I met were new. At OTC, I entered the booking office and sat down on one of the forms as if I was waiting for a bus. I still had my suitcase. The place was very crowded that day, for it was the end of the month, and a weekend. Everybody, except me, seemed very busy. There was also a boy about my age who seemed busy too. He also had a box. What attracted me to him was the way in which he behaved. He seemed very uneasy. I watched him for lack of something to do and also to keep myself from the thought that I was hungry. I had not eaten 2 suppers and a lunch. This was yet another lunchtime and I still had nothing to eat. Suddenly, I saw him look from side to side and, satisfied that he was not being watched, he pulled a wallet from the back pocket of an old, well-suited padre. The wallet was quite fat. For no reason at all, I was filled with fear, my heart skipped a beat, my hands started shaking, and yet, I was not the one who was pickpocketing. As the wallet left the pocket, the boy turned and saw that I was staring at him with my mouth wide open. The boy put the wallet in his breast pocket. He passed near me and signaled me to follow him. I knew he was afraid that I might raise an alarm, but he was wrong. That was one of the few things I could not do. I followed him to Kaka Hotel. When we were seated, he ordered food for both of us. People were very busy there and none seemed to notice the other. As we waited for our order, he told me, "Next time, never stare at someone that way. You almost made the padre suspicious." "What do you do for a living?" he asked me. "I am one of you," I answered. "When it comes to questions and answers, I am very good at them." I never hesitate answering. A pickpocket you mean? Yes, when I am badly off. And why did you seem so surprised? I wanted you to think exactly as you did and to do just what you did. I followed that man for over 2 hours. He was given that cash by his own son at GPO. Since then, we have gone to 101 places. He bought so many things that I was afraid that he would have nothing left for me. But he had plenty. Bring my share so that I may pay for my plate. Things may turn hot and each run his own way. As you said, I also thought that the padre got suspicious. He may burst in here any minute. Thieves are very funny. They are cowardly. I did not expect this one to part with anything so easily. To my surprise, he looked left and right, and satisfied that nobody was interested in our presence, he took out the wallet. The waiter brought our orders and the boy put the hand with the wallet under the table. When the waiter went, he unzipped the wallet, under the table. I bent to his side and made sure that I saw all the contents in the wallet. My curiosity had outdone my hunger. Brother, the wallet was not fat for nothing. My first sight told me that there was not less than 800 shillings. There was a small bundle of 100 shilling notes and another of 50 shilling notes. The red ones were 7 and the others were 6. He gave me 4 of the red ones and 2 of the 50 shilling notes. I did not even want to know what the inner pocket of the wallet contained. 500 shillings for nothing was too much. I quickly pocketed my cash and then I remembered that I was hungry. When I started eating, I did it at a rather astonishing speed. My man then gave me the wallet and told me to go and get rid of it on my way home. That thing really gave me a hard time. Before then, I had never held a stolen article or cash in my hands, except the 600 shillings that I had taken from my father's coat, but I counted that as my share. Mother had given my brother more than that for fees the same day I left home. I was fearing that after I had dumped the wallet, the police would find it and search for fingerprints. I thought that they could trace me anywhere as soon as the prints were detected. That was how naive I was then. After finishing our lunch, we got busy talking. I learned that my man lived at Makadara, where he shared a room with 2 other boys. The room cost them 100 shillings per month. Can that room of yours take 4 beds? I want to shift from where I stay. The police are frequenting that area too much these days. I am staying in Eastleigh Section 2, I lied. You are lucky, Jack. One of the boys is shifting tomorrow. He is going to stay with his girl in Kangemi. His girl's mother, who owned a plot there, died last month and she asked him to go and stay with her. So tomorrow you can shift. That boy might have gone even today. We shall go together there and see what is going on. Thank you. Let us go and have a bottle or 2 somewhere, I told him. We left the hotel and went to Kau Bar. When we had taken about 3 bottles of beer each, there entered 2 gentlemen who made my friend turn almost stiff. He did not even want us to drain the half glasses of beer we had on the table. After paying the bill, we hurriedly left. He took me to Jamii Bar. We drank for some hours and at around 9 o'clock, we went and hired a taxi to Makadara. Once there, he led me to a block of flats at the far corner of Makadara Avenue and opened his room. He lit the room and I saw that, although it had 3 beds, there was plenty of room for 1 more bed. I was not very drunk, as I never take much when drinking with a new person. The room also had a table and 3 dining chairs near the window, at one corner. The following morning, we woke up late. None of the other boys had come, but I could judge by their belongings that they knew their way around. I also learned that the boy who was shifting was a clerk with MOW, that is, the Ministry of Works. My friend, who I discovered was called Wanja, told me to go and bring my belongings. He said that he would wait for me to come back, and also see if the other man would come. In town, I bought myself a Vano bed, a mattress, and 2 pillows. The bed was big enough for 2 and I knew that, at times, I would have visitors. I then bought 3 blankets, 2 sheets, and a bed cover. I was ready with cooked up reasons why I had to buy new beddings. I then hired a taxi and within a short time, I was back at Makadara. I found a man who was moving just about to go, and Wanja introduced us. I took his former position in the room and I made my bed. Nothing more was necessary. For one thing, no one cooked there. None had a wife. So, at long last, I got a place where I could rest my limbs, after sleeping on the pavements for some days. The next day, we got information that the other occupant of the room had been arrested. He had then been in for 2 days. He had been arrested after a fight at night. He was taken to the police station and after his fingerprints were taken to the CRO for checking, the results showed that those were the same fingerprints which were found on an abandoned car that had been stolen outside Ambassador Hotel, and which had been used as a getaway car in a certain robbery in Southsea. At the police station, when we went to see him, he told us the whole story but there was nothing we could do to help him. Months later, he was found guilty of stealing a car and was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. He was discharged on the robbery charge, for the prosecution witnesses could not identify him. So the room now was for the two of us. The one thing with criminals is that they pay their house rent in advance. Right then, they had paid for over 3 months. Since one person was already in prison, and the other one had shifted, I was entitled to their share of the rent. It was a very nice room and I enjoyed the time I stayed in it. I was now becoming my own boss and depending on myself, bringing women home whenever I felt like it. I had become so close to Wanja that we never left each other's side. He was a well-behaved person. So, now here I was back in Nairobi and on my own, but this time with a different occupation. I was now a pickpocket under instruction. I had so far managed to pick the pockets of about 6 people and had got away with about 500 shillings which I had shared with Wanja. He was, of course, a professional and I, only an amateur. Of those 6 times, I was almost caught thrice and so I had already started hating the job. Anyway, at the end of every month, we managed to make more than 3,000 shillings. So rent and clothes were no problem. The worst thing, and especially for me, was the risk involved. Most of the time, Wanja did the picking but there were times when he would tell me to do it. But as I was very new at it, I depended on him very much. Months and months passed, and now I had come to know several barmaids and common prostitutes in town. I had changed greatly. For over a year, I had not visited home nor had I got any reports from or about my people there. I did not even know the fate of my brother who, by then, had done his school certificate. Within that time, I had been in and out of various police stations more than 10 times. I had been fined 3 times for being drunk and disorderly, and 2 more times for assault, and the other times, I was lucky to get away with merely entering the dock. Within 2 years, that is, between 1965 and 1967, I had become known to many criminals, from robbers, car breakers, shop breakers to car thieves and racketeers. I had also come to be known by the name of Jack Zalo. I left the risky job of picking pockets and joined car breakers. This was risky too but not half as risky as picking pockets. Besides, the job paid almost twice as much as the other one. We broke into tourists' cars mostly, or cars that we had good reason to believe carried enough goods. I had joined a group of 3 boys who had been in the job for some time. Later, I came to understand that these boys were tricky. We would break into a car and get 3 or 4 expensive cameras, pairs of binoculars, tape recorders, radios, suitcases with dollars inside, and such. But when it came to selling them, the boys never gave me the right figure of the amount they had received. So they wizened me up. If one got cash which the others were not aware of, he would keep it for himself. So after sharing what you all knew about, he would disappear until he had finished what he had. The others would run broke far ahead of him. When a thief has enough cash, he will not take a job, however much it might pay. So if you have a job that needs 4 people, and you are only 3, you are handicapped and you have to find other means to get some cash to push ahead until the 4th member of your gang runs broke. One night, Wanja failed to come home for the night. I was surprised, for we had agreed that no one should sleep out without notifying the other. We had agreed that if one of us went missing, the other was to go to various police stations within the town to check. I, therefore, left home at around 8 the following morning. I had a terrible hangover, but I knew that 2 pints of milk would do the trick. I had left him the previous night, in Ruidia nightclub, talking to a barmaid called Jane Engery. He had assured me, in front of her, that he would come home, and now that he did not come, I took it that the girl knew his whereabouts. I alighted the bus at Tusker House and crossed the road towards Terrace Hotel. Outside the hotel, someone caught me by the right arm. It was the very girl I was looking for. "Zalo, did you go to see Wanja in Central Police Station?" she asked me before saying anything else. "I am not aware that he is there. In fact, I left home to come and see you so that I may know what happened." "So he is in Central? What did he do?" "I don't know for sure. He left me sitting at the very corner you left us last night and he went to the toilets. As he was coming back, a man and a girl, followed by 3 policemen, came and pointed at him and said, 'This is one of them.' They were 3 and I recognized this one because of the red polo neck he is wearing, but he was not wearing a red polo neck when I left him. He had on a black V-shaped sweater. He also had a black corduroy coat. So when did he change into a red polo neck?" "Just about 10 minutes after you left. A man he later told me was called Kanyaru, came in a hurry as if he had been chased. When he saw Wanja, he told him to follow him to the toilets. When they came out, Wanja was wearing the red polo neck. The other man was wearing the sweater and the corduroy coat and he went upstairs. 3 minutes later, the police and the 2 arrived. He did not even try to defend himself. In fact, he did not even get the chance to. The girl was screaming at him and I noticed her dress was torn at the breasts. As for the man, he was not speaking but his forehead was bleeding slightly. My God, that is robbery with violence, and there is nothing I can do to help him. If I go to see him at the station, I will be arrested as one of the other 2. Now, this is what you will do. I'll give you some money to buy a thermos flask, some tea, and a loaf of bread. Take them to him. He won't be able to eat but you must do it. He will then tell you what he wants us to do. I will come and see you at Ruidia at around lunchtime. Understand?" "Yes, I understand," she said. I gave her the cash and we parted. I was quite sure that that was the end of the road for Wanja. He would get no less than 14 years. The new law on robbery with violence was by then at its worst and everyone arrested and charged under it was going in, whether he was guilty or not. There were 2 people to say that he was one of the crooks who attacked them. How was the judge to know that they were lying? At the same time I was quite sure that Wanja was not going to tell the truth about what really happened. He would not say that he had exchanged clothes with a man he believed was escaping arrest. It would only prove that they were together. Wanja was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment with 20 strokes of the cane. He was given the right of appeal within 2 weeks. It was all useless to appeal, for nothing happened. I am with him in prison as I write this book. Now, I was all alone in the house at Makadara. I was to pay 100 shillings at the end of the next month, but that was not the problem. The problem was these beds and the boxes belonging to the 2 in prison. I did not know where any of them came from. When I went to Kamatai prison to inquire about Wanja, I was told that he was not there. When I asked where he could have been taken to, I was told he might be in Mombasa. Well, I was not going to go all the way to Mombasa just to ask a criminal where his home was. And for the other one, I did not even know his name. The MOW clerk who went to stay with his girlfriend never turned up since his departure. So what else was I to do but to sell all their lot to the landlord? After all, I wanted to buy modern furniture for the room now that I was alone. I had to keep pretending to be a qualified clerk somewhere. I even had to bring more decent girls home. All this happened within 2 years. And in those 2 years, nobody in my family knew of my whereabouts. I had never even met one accidentally, not even Tom, my uncle. Chapter 2. One day, a few weeks after I had cleared the house of my mate's property, I lay on my bed thinking of how I would fill the room with better furniture. I wanted to buy at least 1 or 2 sofa sets, as the room was large enough to hold them now that it had only one bed, about 3 tables, a small wardrobe, a kitchen cupboard and a charcoal burner, a stove, cooking utensils, a carpet, and better curtains. When I estimated their total cost on rough paper, I found that they needed something close to 2,000 shillings. But right then, as I was holding the pen, I had only a little over 100 shillings. That was 1,900 shillings less. From where do I get the rest? I asked myself. I felt hungry and got up. I put on my shoes and my coat, and I decided to take my lunch in town. So after locking my house, I boarded a bus for town. I went to Terrace Hotel and I was about to finish my lunch when a friend of mine called Captain Ngugi entered. He was with another man whom he introduced me to. I ordered some lunch for them. These boys were so natty that they made me feel a little inferior, smart as I was. Over the lunch at the lonely corner where we were, Captain told me a story that entered my veins. "Zalo, this friend of mine and I want a man we can trust," he started. I could see that he was looking from side to side to make sure that no one was listening. There wasn't anyone near, so he continued. "I am well aware of the job you do, and most of you guys are too cowardly to take on a big job. A job like robbery, I mean. But what I want you to know is that whether you like it or not, you will once be in the job. Anyway, as you can see, 2 of your gang members are now in prison. I understand that Wanja was imprisoned for 15 years, yet he has never robbed in his goddamn life. He was your friend and you know that he would not have robbed anybody or connected himself with anybody who would go for robbery. So I guess, as a wise boy, you must have learned a lesson there. Now then, we would like you to join us in a certain job. Are you going to take it?" I considered all the facts silently and quickly. It was true I feared robbery as it carried a very severe sentence. But then, I considered Wanja's case, 15 years for nothing? Then 2 of my members had been caught red-handed breaking into a car. When they tried to escape, one was shot in the leg and the other in the neck. The latter almost died, but he was lucky because the bullet passed through the muscles of his neck and went out without severing any artery. Still, it had made him fall down flat as if he had been hit with a 1-ton kosh at the back of his head. Fingerprints from the cars they had broken into were brought up in court. They got 11 years with 33 strokes. The third fact was that I needed money to furnish my house. I was sure that I could get money on my own, but right then, I had no plans. The amount I wanted this time was quite a lot, and after all, I could not expect things to fall from above, as people from my home area used to say. I would do it whatever the consequences, I concluded. What was more risky than picking people's pockets? I asked myself. Captain knew I was thinking about it and he gave me time to do it. I knew one of their gangsters had earlier retired after sharing a total of 80,000 shillings from a robbery. He had bought a Peugeot 404 family saloon for road services. "What is the job?" I asked Captain. "I told you it is robbery with violence." My heart skipped a beat when he added the words "with violence." Where violence was concerned, the court was very strict. "You told me that before, but where is the job? It is not a tough job, Zalo, so stop trembling. It will need only 4 of us, and it is not in town. It will be outside a certain bank in Westlands. A certain white man will be taking his money there with a big bag, and your only job will be to snatch it. I will be covering you, and this man here will be covering the driver. Simple as that. Now the question is this, are you taking the job? Supposing I do, When will it take place? No suppositions. Are you taking the job or do we go and find someone else? Okay. You win. When do we pull it off? Tomorrow morning at 9:30. Where do you stay? In East Lee Section 2, I lied, for I did not see the reason why he should know where I stayed. I see. You know Westlands very well, don't you? I do, yes, all right. We will meet at Ajip Motel in Westlands, 4 of us, so that we may all know each other. So far, it is only the driver you haven't met and I guess you know him. Everything is ready and all you have to do is to come early and arm yourself with a simi. What the hell do I need the simi for if my only job is to snatch? Things might go wrong, you fool, and you may need to defend yourself with it. Or do you think it is your father's money we are going for? He may play it tough and refuse with the dough. You have never dealt with these white people. You wait and see. Now he was making me really sweat. If the white man played it tough with me, then I was sunk. And Captain talked as if he was sure that the white man would not part with the bag easily. At the bar, Captain ordered 3 bottles of beer for each one of us. There was no more to be discussed, so I drained mine in haste and excused myself. Captain went out with me to rebrief me. Come at around 8 so that we may have time to arrange our positions. Our driver is working on the car so I cannot tell you for sure its registration number. All I know is that it is a Cortina GT. You will know the rest when you come. Remember the simi, for it can turn out to be very helpful sometimes. You may need a newspaper too to keep you busy while waiting. Not for reading though, because if you take too much interest in it, you might not notice him. I will point out the European to you long before he goes to bring the money, so it will not be hard for you to identify him. Is there anything you don't understand? Well, I guess not. I'll be ready with everything. You can rely on me, Captain, I said. That pleased him very much. The way in which he had briefed me made me like him. With his education, you would not have thought he could be a robber. He had lost 3 responsible jobs. Then he had thought it wise to try the other side of the law. When he was sure that I was well informed, he wished me a good time and went back to the bar. I was feeling very nervous and I wanted time to rest and to think. I boarded a bus outside Terrace Hotel and in 30 minutes, I was in my house resting and thinking. This was the first time that an idea of going to rob had been put into my mind. The thought of the prison sentence it carried broke my heart into pieces. But now that I had agreed to participate, there was no turning back, if I cared for my peace, which I did. Well, if this room is not filled within a week from now, it will never be filled, I said to myself. Then, still deep in thought, I got up and went outside to the place where I kept my simi. I took it out, wrapped it in a sweater, then I entered the house with it. I was sure no one noticed. I unwrapped it and saw that it was as fine as I had kept it months back. I had not bought it for committing robberies. Most criminals keep simis for self-defense. We were always in trouble, either with the police, or with the other criminals. It looked very new and sharp too. I put it on the bed, then lit a cigarette. As I lit it, I heard a steady knock at the door. Good God! What am I in for now? I asked loudly, hiding the simi under the pillow. As I did so, and before I had admitted in the knocker, the door opened, and a girl I recognized as one of the tenants in the same plot I was living in, came in. I had never talked to her before, despite the fact that we were staying in the same block. It was her first time to enter the room as far as I knew. Welcome, miss. How do you do? Oh, thank you. How do you do? When I noticed you were in, I thought I should visit you, for you never invite us here and neither do you talk to us. She said this as I pointed to the bed for a seat. There were no chairs. The only ones that had been there had long gone with the MOW clerk to his girlfriends. The seats I could now provide were a suitcase, a wooden box and a bed. I have no chairs here, miss, so please select the place that most suits you. She sat on the bed. Then tell me, you, and who else don't I invite, or didn't I hear your remark well? You heard me well, Zalo. I am talking about my roommate and me. You know my name then? How did you come across it? Wanja was a friend of mine, though you did not know. Not much of a friend anyway, she said as an afterthought. To put it more correctly, he was an acquaintance. So he told me of you when you came to live here. Well, that takes care of that. Now we come to your problem. I guess you didn't come all the way to introduce yourself or just to make me know that you know me. Isn't that so, miss? I was being rude, deliberately. One thing I never liked was getting too acquainted with whores around my residential area. Supposing I came home with a new girl and they made a scene? Moreover, I was breaking most of my connections with prostitutes as a whole, and especially such as this one. But the most important reason for my rudeness was that, right then, I wanted to be left completely alone. I could see that she was about to notice the simi under the pillow, as part of it was protruding. She wasn't even sitting still on the bed, and kept on wriggling her buttocks and in the process, moving the pillows from their positions. Don't be rude, Zalo. Must you be that way even to a visitor? I am not rude, miss. That is the way I talk, if you must know. Talk business, and I guess that way we will understand each other. If it is about being broke and you want to give me a ride for £1, I am sorry to inform you that I am impotent. For as long as I have stayed with you here, you will have noticed that I never bring women home. If you have seen one, know that she is here for other businesses. I wonder why Wanja didn't tell you this. You must be very naughty, Zalo, or maybe I came in at the wrong time. I'll excuse you for the time being, but count on it that I'll come back one of these days when you are in the right mood. Save your calories for future use and for someone else, baby. I never want company, and if I ever do, I know where to get it from. Anyway, I wish you a nice time. Don't see me again if you want peace. When she had gone, I took the simi and locked it in the wooden box. I went back and lay on the bed. I felt so uneasy, until I began to think the girl was right when she suggested that I needed company. I even wondered why I had turned that girl down in such a hurry. Maybe her presence would have made me forget this thing that was stinging my head. I really needed company. I must have fallen asleep without knowing, for when I woke up, I was in total darkness and my watch claimed it was 10 minutes past 8. I felt hungry. I put on the light, put on my coat, and I went out in search of supper. Back home after supper, I selected a drum magazine and tried to read. I couldn't. I took the day's newspaper which I had bought, but that too couldn't do me any good. I felt that I couldn't stay alone that night, so I went out and boarded a bus for town. I went to the New Ruidia. As I was taking my second bottle of beer, a girl invited herself and sat on a chair beside me. She refused to take any intoxicants and I ordered some soda for her. We introduced ourselves, me giving a false name. After some bottles, I proposed that we should go to some place if she did not have any more business around. She agreed on the usual terms, and so we left. Back in Makadara, I sat on the bed and started thinking, here I am, back in my house, sitting on a bed with a girl who, no doubt, will demand £1 tomorrow morning, and yet, some hours earlier, I turned down one, who I was sure was offering herself to me free of charge. Now the trouble is, I must wake up very early tomorrow so that I can get rid of this one, and then prepare myself for the greatest risk I have ever taken. I thought of praying, and in the darkness, I said the Lord's Prayer. That was as much as I could do. I was not going to pray to God to help me as I was about to fornicate, and I was not going to pray that God help me because the following day I was going to rob a white man of his money. My God! What should I do? The girl touched me and all that faded away. She was definitely earning her pound. Before I slept, I asked her to make sure she woke me up early, in case I overslept. When I woke up the following morning, I felt very fine. I took a bath and selected a suit. I then took my kimono and wore it. The girl was ready. I took her to the bus stop and I went back home. I now took the simi and placed it against the outer side of my left thigh. I then tightened my belt, to hold the simi in place. I noticed, as I lit a cigarette, that my hands were very steady. I went to a nearby tea kiosk where I could only stand, and ordered a pint of milk and some buttered toast. If all goes well, I will be a rich boy when I pass here again, I thought. But then, if it turns out the other way round, this is the last pint of milk I will have for years. An instinct told me to hope for the best but to be prepared for the worst. At about 7:15, I was at the Ajip Motel. I had a Daily Nation newspaper, and I pretended to be busy reading and waiting for somebody. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Captain Ngugi and his friend. They seemed very happy to see me, as if they had not expected me to turn up. They led me to where the driver, David Mwangi, was. We knew each other and I was glad that he was our driver. It was going to be my first time to travel in a stolen car after a raid and I felt very uneasy. I knew Mwangi had done a good job to get the car, but that did not make me feel any better. A few yards from where our car was, a white man came and parked a Citroën. Captain told me to look at him very closely. He closed his car and entered the motel. After about 30 minutes, he came out and went off in his car. Captain said, "Now when he comes again he will be carrying a large brown bag. In it will be not less than 30,000 shillings. Mwangi, you will park the car facing the road. When you see the white man, you start the engine. Sammy will be somewhere near you in case you are suspected by a pedestrian. You, Zalo, will be reading the paper near the bank as if you are a customer, waiting for it to open. He will come facing you and I'll be behind you. You'll start walking as if you just remembered something you ought to do before you get into the bank, and as you pass him, you will snatch the bag, jump forward and take out your simi. And by the time you do that, I will have worked on him pretty well. I assure you he will not try to hold you after what I'll have done, only make sure you don't cut him to death." "I can't stand a murder trial," I said. "I have got better ideas than cutting up young people. You are new in this, you wait and see. And Mwangi, as we come make sure all the doors are open. Zalo and Sammy will use the back seat, and take care you don't drop that bag in fear." We went to the bank and each took his position. Mwangi was not there. He was to bring the car when he saw the Citroën. I got busy reading the paper or pretending to read. A man passed by and I saw him stare at the paper I was reading, and then at me. I thought he could see what I carried inside my coat. Some yards away from me, he looked at me and stopped. He was a Ludo. I got frightened. I looked at myself closely to make sure that there was no visible sign of my carrying a simi, then satisfied, I looked at him. He smiled at me and went away. As I looked at my paper again, I noticed that I had been reading it upside down. I also smiled as I turned it the right side up, and I knew then that it was the reason the man thought I was phony around there, if that is what he thought. The bank had just opened. The red Citroën arrived just as I was turning over another page. My heart increased its beats by 1 or 2. I felt heat all over me. At the corners of my eyes I saw Captain, who had not changed his position, then I saw Mwangi parking the car as agreed. Sammy came up to him and greeted him joyfully as if they had not met for years. I then saw Mwangi light a cigarette. I turned round and looked at Captain, who winked at me. The white man was by then locking his car, holding a large brown bag with his left hand. He then started coming towards the bank. I closed and folded my newspaper and put it in my coat pocket. I also felt for the simi and satisfied myself that it was there. I was trembling but not too much to be noticed. When he was about 4 meters away from me, I started moving towards him, pretending not to notice him. He had shifted the bag to the right hand, so I kept left. Just as I was about to pass him, I snatched the bag so strongly that instead of the bag being in my possession, I fell down some yards away from it. I had not expected a gunshot. I did not even know that we had one. The first thought that entered my mind was that it was the police. I gripped the sima very tightly, then I heard Captain's voice, "Don't you dare touch that boy, put your hands up and face the other way." It was then that I took the bag and fled into the getaway car, which was then in the center of the road with its doors open. Captain fired some more shots in the air as we entered the car. The pistol shots frightened me so much that I did not notice that I had dropped my sima. In fact, I only came to know it was lost as we were abandoning our car. We drove off towards town, past Central Police Station, then entered Government Road until we found our way to Eastleigh Section 2. We abandoned the car and went off with our bag full of money. On the 13th Street, Mwanji opened a room and we went inside. I was sweating. I did not mention the loss of my sima, for if I did, I knew they would all be as restless as I was and there could be none to ease the other's burden. The cash was all poured onto the bed. So many 100-shilling notes, 50, 20, 10 and 5. I was given the job of counting as I was regarded as being fresh from school. I did it, but it was with a great struggle that I managed to hide my shock. I had never seen so much money before and had never expected to. A total of 33,000 shillings. Captain said, "Okay, divide the cash between 5 people and keep it in bundles." No. Mwanji said, "First take out the 3,000 shillings on top. Then keep 5 heaps of 6,000 shillings each." I did that. I was not asking any questions. All I wanted was to get my share and run as far away as I could from that house. After getting my 6,000, I did not even want to know where the rest was to be taken, though it was explained to me later. The information had come from the white man's chauffeur and he was entitled to a share. Then the one who had given us his gun would get the other 6,000. I filled all my pockets with money in a hurry and stood up. Captain looked at me and asked, "Where is your sima?" "I have got it here," I lied, indicating where it had been before. "I told you there would be no trouble. Now look, you have got 6 grand of your own. You would never get that much in your former job. Now you have teamed up with us and we admit you in our company. You acted a bit frightened, but it was all right since it was your first robbery. Next time, you will do better. Okay boys, I want to run along." "I have other things to do," I said. They all stood up and we went out. Once in the street, each went his own way. I took a bus to town and at Tusker House, I alighted, crossed Duke Street, now Ronald and Gala, and outside Terrace Hotel, I boarded another bus for Makadara. I was feeling every eye on me. I thought everyone I met was suspicious and I thanked God for not letting me meet a cop, for I would have given myself away. The money was feeling pretty hot in my pockets. At Makadara, I passed the very kiosk where I had taken milk and buttered toast earlier and I smiled when I remembered my thoughts. One of the thoughts had come true, I was very rich. I opened my house and entered. I took off my kimono and my coat and hung them on the wall. I went to the bed and sat down. I noticed I was sweating a lot. That was my first time to have such an amount of money and I was a bit confused. I thought of buying a second-hand car, then I remembered that I would have to employ driver. I thought of buying a plot, then I remembered that it cost over 30,000 shillings. I realized that that money had confused me completely. I took out a cigarette and lit it. As I was putting the lighter back, it fell down and as I was picking it up, I saw a piece of paper under the bed and I took it. It had the estimate of the house furniture I was planning to buy. I had completely forgotten all about it. What kind of a man am I proving to be? I asked myself. I had agreed to take the risk because I wanted to furnish my house, and now that I had more money than I wanted, the idea had vanished from my mind. I thought of going to town right then but remembered it must be hot. If I went out buying all those things so soon after we had pulled a job, I would look suspicious. So that must wait until tomorrow or the day after. Again, it was some days to the end of the month, and most people were broke, but that did not matter much. I could be taken for a businessman, and those always have money. Even at the time when people say the month is at the corner, money is always circulating. It does not mean that all the money is locked up somewhere and taken out only at the end of the month. So I decided to buy the furniture the following day. I would also buy a radio and a record player. A tape recorder too would do, if all goes well, I said to myself. I opened the suitcase and arranged the notes there in order of value, from 5-shilling notes to fivers. I took 2 50-shilling notes and went out. I felt I needed something to cool my body. I was sweating too much for my comfort. I did not want to go to town and I did not even want to meet anybody who knew me. So I thought the best thing was to go to a location where I was not known. I decided to go to Jericho and I set off on foot. At Jericho Social Hall, I stopped for about 3 minutes to read some adverts on movies and dances. I decided I would see the movies and attend the dances when their time came. In any case, I would not miss both. I entered a bar, went to the hotel room and ordered for some food. It was a bit too early for a beer. So I ordered a pint of condensed milk from the refrigerator and started relaxing. As I was draining the last drop of milk from the glass, I felt someone touch me at the neck. A very soft hand that I knew, even before I turned, belonged to a female. That was the greatest surprise I had had for the past 3 years. Behind me stood my sister. When I looked up, she was staring at me with her mouth wide open. I guess her mouth could see better than her eyes. I was surprised to see her all right, but not half as surprised as she was to see me. Behind her stood a very natty, medium-aged man, about 5 feet 10, brown, with a shallow face. There was something about him that made my heart skip a beat. He also came forward and looked at me, smiling broadly. My sister spoke first. "Jack, it can't be you. All those years." She could not go further. She started weeping. The man comforted her and then asked me to follow them out. As we went out, she stopped weeping and started sighing. I remembered that I had not settled my bill and I went back to pay. Then I joined them outside. "Sonny Connie, I didn't mean to run away from you, but I had to run away from home. We will talk about that later. Let us go to my place." So I followed them. She was not even able to introduce me to the man she was with. The other surprise was that she was telling me to go with her to her home, and the last time I saw her, over 2 years back, she was at home, teaching in Thuata school. Now she was talking about her home in Nairobi. 10 minutes later, we stood in front of a house in Uhuru Estate and she was knocking at the door. A maid opened it and we entered a very well-furnished room with a heavy carpet and a very fine double sofa set. I selected a seat and made myself comfortable. The man spoke. "Mary, so this is the brother you are always talking about, eh?" "Yes, he is the one." Then turning to me she added, "Jack, meet Kamal, my husband. We have been married for over a year now. You can see these photographs." She picked 2 different wedding photos from the picture rail on the wall and showed them to me. The first one was of her and her husband, the other was of both families. I looked at my mother closely and saw she was somehow excited. My father was lifting his right hand with the forefinger up indicating peace. He was grinning. Brother Sammy had his whole mouth wide open. 3 of my younger sisters were wearing the uniform of bridesmaids. Everyone else in my family was there except me. Satisfied, I looked up. I saw then the shock on her face had vanished and she looked herself again. We stared at each other until I looked away. In fact, I was not enjoying myself. I loved that girl so much that I hated the thought that she got married in my absence. But then who was to blame? None of us, I concluded. I then shook hands with my brother-in-law. I was glad to meet him. He appeared to me as one of those characters you feel safe when he is around. Then the endless questions and answers started. "Why did you run away? Where do you stay? What do you do? When will you go back home? Would you like any help? And so many others. But as I have told you, I am very good at answers and reasoning. I gave them such a story that I almost believed it myself. At last I said to Connie, I am sorry you got married in my absence, but anyway there is nothing I could have done to make it look better than it appears in the photos. I wish you happiness and best wishes. Now that I have known your home, I will be visiting you. What else could I say? The radio started playing Kanuya Yengenji, which meant that it was time for the news. My mind had been so occupied with the encounter with my sister that I had forgotten everything else. When the reader started the news in brief, we kept quiet. But my mind was not on the news. There was nothing in my mind except the happiness and confusion after meeting my sister Connie, whom I loved more than any other member of my family. I was not in any case very good at listening to radios. I preferred newspapers, though they are always 12 hours late. Then I heard it. 4 bandits got away with 33,000 shillings outside a bank in Westlands this morning. I almost jumped out of my seat. I had forgotten all that. I now listened more attentively. 4 bandits armed with a pistol and semis got away with 33,000 shillings outside KCB in Westlands this morning. The money was being taken to the bank by the manager of Lavaswool Ltd. After snatching the money, they fired a bullet in the air, forcing the manager to put up his hands and to turn round facing the wall. A young boy estimated to be between 18 and 23 and smartly dressed snatched the bag. While struggling to enter the getaway car, he dropped his SIM. The police are working on his prints. An early arrest is expected. You can imagine how I felt. The SIM, for instance, had gone out of my mind. Now there it was, in the hands of the police, and they were sure to get my fingerprints. I felt heat replace the cool atmosphere that was in the room. I felt sweat on my face. I felt my sister's eyes on me. I had to go, for if I didn't I would give myself away. My brother-in-law stood up and went to the toilet. I told my sister I should go. I was only trying because I knew she was not going to release me so easily. If I was to go, she was to go with me, if only to make sure she knew where I stayed. My quick decision to go so soon after the news and my darkened face had made her suspicious. She asked her husband to excuse her and I wished him goodbye. We went on foot to my place. On the way, we talked a lot. At one point she asked me, "Jack, are you sure you are not the young boy who has just been described? Be frank with me. You know I cannot tell even my own mother. You ought to know me better than that. I am sure, Jack, you are concerned, and if you won't be frank with me, I am going to search your room as soon as we arrive there. I have known you too long to be wrong. I have never been in Westlands in my life, Connie," I lied. "Believe me. Furthermore, why the hell should I do such a thing? For money, and you need it pretty badly. Have you forgotten our father's 600 shillings? If you can steal your father's, whose can't you? I am very sure you are the one, but anyway it won't be long before I know everything." As it turned out, she was right. I liked her too much to prevent her from searching my house or doing whatever else she pleased. I offered her a share, but she would not take even a penny. I tried to convince her that it was not the money that was being talked about, but she was too clever for me. Anyway, if she is as secretive as she used to be, there won't be any leakage, I told myself. I then told her how I wanted to furnish my home and the other things I wanted to buy. She volunteered to help me buy them and reminded me to get a spare bed. As she was on maternity leave, we spent that and the following week buying the furniture I needed and other necessary things. At the end of the second week, which was also the end of the month, I was enjoying the art of my own hands. I had a sofa set, a carpet, new curtains, coffee tables, a wardrobe, a kitchen cupboard, a charcoal burner, a stove, a set of tea utensils, a radiogram and a tape recorder. The last two I bought from a black market dealer. Chapter 3. Connie kept on visiting me after our meeting and I kept on seeing her at her home. I became her husband's friend. About 6 months after our meeting, Connie asked me if I would like to shift into another house that had 2 rooms, a bathroom, a toilet, and a kitchen. I was to add only 50 shillings per month over the rent I paid for my present single room in Makadara. I agreed with her even before I knew where the apartment was, and when I realized later that it was in Wood Street in Eastleigh, I was delighted. That was a very nice place for a man with my kind of job, and I liked it better than any other place I stayed in Nairobi. A week later, I shifted to that place and arranged my house with Connie's help. She liked the place better than where she lived. She even suggested that I should get married because the house was large enough for 2. None of my friends knew where I stayed, and I intended never to let them know. If I let them know, the police would also know. Within 6 months after the Westlands job, I was completely broke. Most of the money had gone into the furniture I had bought and in the advance payment of rent for my former house in Makadara. I had spent the rest on whores in nightclubs, and on cinemas. I woke up early one morning to go and see if Connie would spare me at least £1 before she went to school. At around 7, I knocked at the door of her house in Uhuru Estate. She was awake and in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Her husband had slept out that night. There was a bed in the sitting room which I was sure never stayed there, and in it was a person asleep. The shoes on the floor told me that the occupant was female. I talked to Connie, and when the occupant of the bed heard my voice, she jumped up as if she had just realized a snake was lying beside her. It was my mother. I did not know whether to cross over that short distance to her or to turn and run away. I only stayed where I was, my mouth semi-open. But she came straight to me and held me so tightly that I was afraid she'd break my limbs. She seemed to think that I would just vanish and stay for many more years without seeing her. After some time she managed to speak. "Oh, my lost son. Bless the Lord for bringing you back to me safely. Why on earth did you have to run away from home and never once think of coming back? Can't you be at least kind to me? I have missed you dearly, and I am glad to see you after all those years." As she said these words, tears were flowing from her eyes. I had gone there to be helped out of the financial trouble I was in, but instead, I was being wept over. Then when Connie saw her mother weeping, she too started weeping. This earth is full of surprises. Now here was my mother. Fate had made me meet her while I had not a penny in my pockets. The last shilling I had was taken by the merciless Kenya bus conductor for taking me from Wood Street to Uhuru Estate. I had bought 2 sportsman cigarettes with the 20 cents they had spared me. What a hell of coincidence. No. I must do something to wash away the shame. No matter what type of something, but something, whatever the risk. Why hadn't she come when I had the 6,000 shillings? At least I would have given her 2,000 shillings to prove myself a gentleman. She wasn't a poor woman, yes, but supposing she asked me to buy her a dress with the money I had been earning in those years I had been away from home? I asked myself all these questions as she talked to me. I did not even hear most of what she said. She was telling me things without a comma, how if I agreed to go home with her, everyone would be delighted. She made me promise that I would go home with her to see the rest of the family, and she added they would at least expect a share of what I had been earning. That alone made me almost run mad. I hadn't a penny on me, and I had agreed to go home with her. I knew without being told that going home empty-handed, after such a period of time, was antisocial. I left her after promising that I would take supper with them there. I went out prepared for the worst that would befall me in my search of what I was to take home with me. I went round the whole town without good results. I did not even meet anyone I knew. Everything was against me, and I decided not to give myself more trouble but to go and rest until tomorrow. I did not eat anybody's lunch that goddamn day. At around 5, it started raining heavily. I suddenly decided to go to New Ruidia to demand back 200 shillings a friend owed me. But it was all in vain. The best he could do was to order 4 bottles of beer for me instead, and when I demanded cash, I couldn't get it. What a pity. A man is prepared to buy you as many bottles of beer as you can drink, but not in the least prepared to give you half their cost in cash. I will never understand people. After the 4 bottles, I decided to go so as to get prepared for the supper I was to take with my mother at my sister's. The rain still fell heavily as I descended the stairs. Outside, I turned right, then crossed the road towards Nyanza Bar. The street lights were on as it was dark. At the far corner of the road, I saw a car with brown mud on its body. I noticed it had Uganda registration numbers. I noticed too that it had just been parked as its body was still warm despite the heavy rain. I stood beside it and saw a canvas bag and a large suitcase in the back seat. Then on the driver's door, I saw a sticker that told me that the car belonged to a tourist club in Uganda. Whoever had parked it there was new in Kenya and was probably searching for a lodging, or had left it there unaware of how Nairobi operated. Thinking quickly, I took out a bunch of keys I used to use when breaking into cars. A criminal friend of mine had advised me to use keys to open a car instead of a screwdriver, which would force me to break into it, and I had found it a sound idea. I tried all the keys I had and was about to despair when the last one opened it. I entered the car as if it belonged to me. I was very calm. I took every step deliberately. First, I took the canvas bag and opened it. What I saw inside justified my action. The suitcase could not be broken into there and then, but its weight made it worth taking away. I then opened the dashboard compartment to see if I could get something to smoke as I carried my luggage, but what I saw there almost made me stop dead. Kept, as if for show, was a pistol. At first, I feared its sight and wouldn't dare touch it. Then I remembered how we had used one of that type in Westlands, and with lightning speed, I took it and put it in the left, outer pocket of my coat. It fitted as if the pocket was made to carry it. With the same speed, I shot out of the car and that place, and found my way to River Road. As I put my luggage down, a route number 10 bus for Wood Street arrived. Within 10 minutes, I was opening the door of my 2-roomed apartment. I did not remember until the following morning that I had promised to have supper with my mother, at my sister's place, and neither did I remember that I had not eaten the whole day. The contents I had found in the car had satisfied my whole body. In the canvas bag were books, novels and some educational material. There was also an encyclopedia. All had the initials G.E. Maxwell Jr. Then I took out 2 pairs of binoculars, a very large camera and a carton which had about 40 rounds of ammunition. This made my heart increase its beats by an excess of 1 or 2. There was also a pouch that had a pair of sun goggles plus a lot of other things. The suitcase was the one that carried what I was in need of. After breaking into it, the first sight was that of a camera stand that I knew would not have fitted in the canvas bag. Then I took out all the clothes one at a time. The owner of the suits I took out must have been as huge as Hercules. I tried to fit into 1 pair of trousers, but it sprawled onto the floor, a length of 1.5 feet. As for the waist, it would have taken me and another man of my size to make it hold a little. Anyway, the clothes did not matter much. I already had too many to care for more. At the bottom of the large suitcase is where I found what had made me risk my life. There were various envelopes and I took one at a time and opened them. The first one had over 10,000 shillings in Ugandan currency. The second had some traveler's checks which turned out to be in great demand by Indians around town. The third and the fourth had nothing of importance to me, but the fifth had a little over 4,000 shillings in Kenyan currency. That was what I was looking for, and truly speaking, as it was my last envelope to pick, my heart was beating a bit faster than usual. The following morning I woke up early and after preparing myself I set off for the Huru estate. Everyone was awake and ready for breakfast and I was welcome to it. I was pretty hungry, but of course I did not tell them so. I was not, under any circumstances, going to let my mother know that there were times when I slept without eating. Brother-in-law Kamau was nowhere to be seen as he had gone to work. My sister Connie and mother were not going anywhere as it was a Saturday, a free day for teachers, so I was to be engaged the whole day. They told me I would go home with mother the following day, if only for a day. Then I told them to accompany me to town, to help me buy presents for those I was going to find at home. I bought everything that they asked me to and a lot more for the children at home. Then when we were satisfied we went back to Ahiru estate. The following day we took a Peugeot at tea room and in less than an hour we were in Mirange. I almost thought the town was deserted. The fact is that after staying in big towns, when you go back to the small ones, you find a great change and you might find yourself wondering how a decent person could agree to stay in such a tiny town. I hate to remember that when I was young, I once stayed awake the whole night after I had been promised a visit to that very town. Within 20 minutes I was being welcomed home. Things were very different from how I had left them. The first surprise I got was that my family had shifted from our old home to another farm they had bought. That meant that if I had gone home alone, I would have had to ask where I belonged. The second surprise was that when I left, our shopping center had only one shop and one butchery. Now there were 4 shops, 1 butchery, a hotel, and a bar and even a posho mill, each standing on its own ground. I looked quite a stranger around there and people stared at me wherever I passed as if I was a zombie. That and the next day were nice and I enjoyed staying with my brothers and sisters who were very glad to see me. But when they all went to school and left me with the maid and the laborer, I started getting tired and restless, and on the third day, I guess they were surprised to find me gone without prior notice. Back in Nairobi I got busy getting rid of the oversized clothes. Believe me or not, if I had known where to contact the owner through the phone, I would have kept them somewhere and told him to collect them. I then changed the Ugandan currency for Kenyan shillings. But as I knew the dough was hot, I had to employ a go-between for a fat fee. The travelers' checks were hot too, and they too needed a hired hand. Then something funny happened. One late night I took the canvas bag and the large suitcase to get rid of. The clothes were not there as I had already got rid of them. I had kept the camera for myself. But the stand was in the suitcase plus the other things I did not want. I had taken a shortcut from Wood Street to KIRIAMITI, through Racecourse Primary School, my idea being to abandon them between that school and KIRIAMITI, when, as I was about to abandon them, 3 people attacked me. They robbed me of everything including 300 shillings, leaving me with only my underwear. They did not beat me much as I did not bother them. As I knew the routine, I did not report anywhere. But 2 days later, I saw with my own eyes, 2 of the people being arrested at KIRIAMITI while trying to sell the suitcase and the canvas bag with the pairs of binoculars that I unintentionally left in the bag to a man I very well knew to be a CID officer always stationed at KIRIAMITI posing as a buyer of black market items. Well, you can guess their charge without being told, and if you don't, then you don't follow me either. That CID officer and another one around there have put handcuffs on a lot of people, and I am sure they will yet put more handcuffs on more people. The problem with me was that with all the cash I had, I did not buy a thing I could live to remember. Instead, I spent it on beer, from this bar to the other, making sure that every prostitute looked my way. Within a short time I was known almost everywhere beer was sold, and within the same period the cops had come to know me by name. They also put me on their list of the wanted criminals, and that was one of the things I later came to regret. My sister Connie always asked me to look for a girl to stay with so that she could be saving whatever I got, but I had never come across one that attracted me. One thing I wasn't going to do was to stay with a termagant. She'd have me arrested so as to get the house. I have known many do that. Connie would introduce me to several of her girlfriends, but none attracted me. Some were teachers she had known, some were secretaries in various offices and the like. But I never felt like loving any of them, though I went around well with whoever she introduced me to. I would sometimes go home from town and find 2 or 3 girls waiting for me. I have been a referee of several showdowns by my girls when they met at my house and each claimed me for a husband. Then one day I got what I was really looking for. It was a Monday and I took a friend to his home at Bahati after drinking with him in the evening. When we arrived there, I felt that I couldn't leave him alone, so we spent the night at his home. The following morning we woke up early as my man was to report on duty at Standard Bank on Kamatha Street. The man left me behind, but I followed soon after. As I was going towards the nearest bus stop, instead of going all the way through Bahati Social Hall, I decided to take a shortcut between the 2 blocks to reach Heshima Road. At the end of the plot on the left, I noticed a thing that looked like a driving license on the ground. I picked it up and saw that it was a student's bus pass supplied by Kenya Bus Services to pupils who went to schools away from their homes. Inside it I saw a photo of a girl which made my heartbeat exceed by 1 or 2. For no reason at all I felt I liked the owner of the photo. She was a student at Sharda High School and I saw that she was doing her final year in the school. The name was Miriam Niambui. I had nothing else to do that day but to go and booze, so I decided I would go and take that bus pass to her, not forgetting to introduce myself. At about 12:15 that day, I was standing at the gate of Sharda High School waiting for the girls to pass by me so that I could pick her out, and if she consented, take her out for lunch. Anyway, at last this girl came in a group often. I called her. She almost ignored me, but then she thought the better of it. The others did not stop, and I liked it, for I wouldn't have liked them to see how contemptuously this girl was looking at me. I almost decided not to talk to her. But when I took out the pass and showed it to her, she smiled for the first time. "Thanks so much. Where did you pick it?" I knew I dropped it somewhere, but I only realized it in the bus and I couldn't go back. "I guess it would be a better idea if you asked me to introduce myself. Suppose a friend of yours comes, what name would you give her, or would you admit that you are talking so happily to a stranger?" Sorry, I was so overjoyed. "I am Millie, as you can see in this pass, and I am Jack Zalo, working with Hughes Limited. And to what tribe does that surname of yours belong, I wonder?" "I am a typical Kikuyu. By the way, I could buy you lunch if you do not mind." "Thank you. I don't mind." So we went out for lunch. One thing I have just forgotten to tell you is that when I saw this girl, I realized the photo had not contained her whole beauty. She was the most attractive girl in all the groups that I had set my eyes on that day. She was about 17, with bright intelligent eyes, and a structure that matched her 5 feet 4. When she smiled, it was then that she showed her whole beauty. I liked the way she spoke in English, and the way she stole glances at me when I was not looking at her. On the way to the hotel, I felt for sure that I had at last met my Helen of Troy. This girl looked feminine. After lunch I escorted her back to school and I went my way. She had told me where she lived and we promised to meet near Bahati Social Hall, where she always went for evening classes. She did typing in her free time. Days passed and I went to see her now and then until we became very intimate friends. She lived with her mother on Heshima Road in Bahati, opposite Morrison Primary School. Her mother, Salome Wangari, had rented a room for her and her 2 young sisters and 2 rooms for herself. One room she used for selling unlicensed beer. A very nice woman Salome was, but if you wanted to know that she carried a Somali knife, all you had to do was to pretend to be very intoxicated and on your way out, go in the direction where her daughters slept. If you did not get a stab in the back, she admired you, but at least you would have found yourself getting up from the ground where she would have thrown you. This woman knew me and I believed she liked me, as I used to spend a lot of money at her place, but whenever I went out of her room, she would make sure of the direction I had taken. One day she caught me red-handed outside the door of her daughter's room and I received a stern warning, the Somali knife held tightly in her left hand. I think I got away with it because of my age. The year passed and Millie sat for her Cambridge school certificate. She passed in Division 2 and started work with the East African Airways at Mbakasi. When she got this job with the EAA, I got better chances of seeing her. I would phone her and request her to have lunch with me and she never turned down my request. On the days she was off duty, I would also take her out of Nairobi to other towns she had not visited. But she wouldn't agree to sleep out. Her beauty and good behavior encouraged me to stick to her and to do away with whores who were craving to own me for themselves. She always said that if it had not been for her mother, she would not be what she was, and she believed she owed her mother everything. She used to say, "If I don't do whatever my mother advises me to, God himself will punish me." Well, I couldn't blame her. If she believes in superstitions, I thought, let her do so. If you really feel you want me, talk with my mother as a gentleman. Her biggest fear is the possibility that we could lead the same type of life she has gone through, she told me one day. But approaching a woman like Millie's mother on such a topic was one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life. First, I wrote her a letter asking her to allow us to wed, but I realized she could not read, so I tore it up. Then an article I had read someplace came into my mind. It said, "Our doubts are our traitors and make us lose the gain we often might win by fearing to attempt." So one day I went to see her about the matter, hoping for the best but prepared for the worst. We were alone in the room where she sold beer. I tried to bring up the matter, then realized that I could not confront her with the issue. Even after taking 4 bottles of beer, I could not do it, though I had expected to after being a bit tipsy. When I left, I decided I must get an experienced person to do it for me. I was then sure that I could not do it on my own. That same day, I went straight to see Joseph Mwangi, a friend of mine who worked with the government printing press. He was a bit older than me, married with 2 children. One of them had been born the same month of his wedding. At home in Murange, his family and mine were very intimate. I gave him my story, and the next day we went to see Miriam's mother. There was no other customer, and when we took our seats we asked for beer for us and for her. When we had taken 3 bottles of beer each, my friend talked to her. "Mum, there's something bothering us and we feel that we ought to ask you. Will you please allow us?" "What is it, young man? Feel free and ask me." "This young man here, I guess you know him, as he tells me he comes here for drinks now and then. The only new person to you is myself, and my name is Joseph Mwangi. Now, together with his coming to take drinks here, he has had a question to ask you, but as he tells me, he has found it hard to ask you personally, and so asked me to ask on his behalf. In fact, as you know, according to our traditions, he is very right. To make it short, the request is he wants to get married to your daughter, Miriam. We would be very grateful if you personally gave us your answer to the request." Tipsy as I was becoming, I could not bring myself to face her wholly, but through the corners of my eyes, I did not fail to notice that her smiling face had darkened soon after the question was asked. She kept quiet, and we thought she would hate our presence for life. It was after about 7 minutes that she decided to talk, but as she was about to say something, there was a knock at the door, and she opened it to admit 2 smartly dressed men. As they took their seats, she turned to us and asked us to follow her. Once outside, I was very surprised to see her leading us to the room where her daughters stayed. If what I knew of her was true, and I am sure it was, we were the first men to be allowed to enter that room. No one was there, as the children were out and Millie was at work. When we were seated, she told us she would not be long, and she went out, closing the door behind her. About 3 minutes later, she came back carrying 10 bottles of beer. She told us, "One of those men is Miriam's father, the one with a bald head, if you noticed it. I'll not forget your request, and I will give you an answer before you leave. It needs some thinking, and I must of course know what Miriam thinks about it. I guess you must have talked before you decided to see me. She is about to come, and if you need more beer, just send her. Feel all right here, young men." At the door, she turned and told us that she would see us before we left. An hour later, Millie came, followed by her young sisters. They all knew me. I introduced them to my friend. Millie was surprised to find us in her room, as she knew how strict her mother was about it, but when she realized that it was her mother who had brought us there, she was overjoyed. We then sent her for more beer to make her mother remember that we were still around, for she seemed to have forgotten us. Our trick worked, for, about 5 minutes later, she came and called Mwangi outside. Millie got suspicious and wanted to know what was going on, but what I told her satisfied her. 30 minutes later, Mwanji came in and the sight of him made my heart beat faster than usual. I could judge from the look on his face that whatever they had talked about had not satisfied him. An hour later when we decided to go, he told me that things were not very bad on my side and that she was not as harsh as he had imagined. That was how far things went, neither no, nor yes. I did not for some time take further action. But one day I thought I should see her again. I had phoned Millie's place of work and had been told that she had not reported for duty. It was around 4 when I arrived at their place in Bahati. When I knocked at her mother's door, the only sound I got was something like a groan. I thought she had a man in bed, so I decided to go to her daughter's room and wait. But even there no one answered. I tried the door and it gave way instantly. The picture that I saw will never run away from my mind. Millie's 2 young sisters lay on the floor. Millie herself sat on a dining chair, her head resting on the table. I knew straight away that something was wrong. First I went to her, and when I pushed her a little, she managed to open her eyes and she tried to speak, but she could not. Her hands were on her stomach. The maid was nowhere to be seen. I bent down to look at the 2 young girls and I noticed that Millie had vomited on the floor under the table. I at once thought of calling an ambulance and went out. Within a minute I was on the phone calling the police. I told the man at the other end to send an ambulance around Bahati Social Hall. I told him that they would meet me there and I would take them to where the people lay unconscious. So far I had not seen Millie's mother, but I guess the groaning I had heard was caused by pain. To my surprise, within less than 2 minutes I heard a siren of an ambulance followed by a police 999 car. I waved to the driver, who followed me a short distance to where the patients were. The mother was lying on the sofa and had also vomited. I heard a nurse say that it must be food poisoning and, as it turned out, she was right. They were all taken to Kenyatta National Hospital and I was left in charge of their rooms. The hospital report said that they had been poisoned with food. I was told that had I delayed for more than 30 minutes they would have all been dead. The maid was arrested 3 months later, but as she was a young girl, she was only put under probation for a period of time. Millie was the first to recover. She left the hospital after a month looking very thin. Then the 2 young girls followed her. When at last the mother came out, she did not even wait to know whether I had done any arrangements about wanting to have her daughter. She was so happy with me for saving their lives that she consented to my living with Millie if I wanted to and prepare the rest later. All the same, I did not go with her then. But some months later she came to stay with me in Wood Street. The trouble with her was that as long as we lived together she never forgot that day. I really enjoyed living with that girl. She is one of the rare type in any country. Life in my apartment in Wood Street soon after Miriam shifted in changed. Everything was rearranged. The kitchen for one came to constant use. The sofas got covers. I never again took my clothes to the dry cleaners, except the suits, and I felt as if I was married. Having the right girl in your apartment is about the most tremendous experience a man can know. Since that time I was never without a packet of cigarettes. Chapter 4. I don't remember very well how long I stayed before pulling another job, but I know that for a time after Millie shifted to my place, I did not. I was therefore feeling unhappy for not having bought her at least a present since she came in. While at her mother's place in Bahati, I had done a lot for her, but that did not count in my heart. I had a gun now but not the least knowledge on how to use it. But I had studied it for a long time and I could now manage to load and unload it. Millie did not know I owned one, but she had accidentally come across the rounds of ammunition I had put in my suitcase. Fortunately she did not know what they were. Early one morning I woke up just as a vehicle from EAA was hooting outside our apartment for Millie. My aim was to go and see Githinji George alias Gigi, who owned a second-hand clothes shop at KIRIAMITI. I had met him at the Central Police Station while I was under arrest for fighting in a public place. He had been arrested as a suspect in a certain bank raid, but when a police informer gave the names of the right people who had pulled the job, Gigi was set free. He had sent me to his place of work when I left him at the police station, and I had helped to have his advocate know he was arrested. So after that we had become friends. As I alighted from the bus, I saw him entering a car. I crossed Racecourse Road in a hurry and was just in time to stop him. When he saw me, he opened the car door for me and I entered. He told me he was off to see a friend in Tika, and if I did not mind, would I accompany him? So we both set off for Tika. On the way we talked a lot. He told me he had borrowed that car from a friend to go and see another friend for some business. He told me there was a European who owned a big farm 15 miles from Tika, and he used to draw money from the bank each end of the month. He wanted to get information on the man so that he could stage a hold-up a few days later. There were only 4 days to the end of the month. At Tika we phoned the man from Mongo Bar. After 15 minutes, the three of us were seated in a private room. He told us that the white man drove a Peugeot 404. He gave his laborers their wages on the dot, at the end of the month, and he drew the money 24 hours before. Does he carry a gun? Gigi asked. Not at all. I am sure of that. I would have noticed it within the 3 years I have served him, KIRIAMITI replied. You can stage the robbery at the bank as he leaves or attack him on the way. Better leave that to us. Your part is only to keep us informed. You told me he phoned some hours to warn you that he is coming. Yes, he does it these days. That is since he became my permanent customer. He is a very nice sort of a character but looks somehow tough. Forget about his being tough. We have met tougher guys who would never part with their cash easily, but we always have a method of persuading them. Where exactly did you say his farm is? About 10 miles from the roundabout towards Nairobi. You'll find a mud road on the left. The mud road runs for 10 miles right to the gate of his farm. From here he drives straight home and phones back to let us know he arrived safely. I have never known him to change his route all the years I have served him. How does he carry the money? I mean, does he use a bag or a box or many bags? He carries the whole lot in one bag. A large handbag. I hope that is about all. You will excuse me now as I must report back. You have only 3 days now if you are planning to pull the job this month. I'll depend on you, Gigi, to bring me my share if all goes well. Well, we wish you good luck, I told him as he prepared to go. You are the ones who need it, he told us and went away. I was feeling so happy that I could not get any words to thank Gigi. I had left my home early to see him precisely for such an idea, and to my good luck, which was also someone else's bad luck, I found him with the same ideas. When we left Mongo Bar we drove towards Nairobi, and from the roundabout we found our way towards the farm. After 10 miles we reached the mud road and we took it. We drove at a slow speed until we reached the gate. We learned that this particular farm belonged to another person. His farm was about 5 miles from that point, and so we started off again. We were glad to find that the rough road was used by different farms. The man would not be very suspicious to find another car on the same road. The road runs through coffee plantations. It was a narrow road and it would be difficult to overtake a car ahead of you. The coffee plantations were so close to the road that it would be easy to ambush the car from both sides. Minutes later we reached the gate to his farm and investigated the area. We could not stage the robbery there, so we dismissed that area. The mud road still went on and we followed it a short distance where we came to the workers' quarters. Satisfied that we could not take that route after committing the crime, we turned our car and went back. On the way back, between the two farms, we saw some bumps we had earlier passed without noticing and stopped. On either side of the road were short cement posts indicating that there were culverts underneath. A wire fence divided the two farms. There was also an uncultivated portion. It was a nice place in which to stage the robbery, since on either side there was a little bush in which to hide. On the way back to Nairobi we discussed how we would pull the job. We had only 3 days and there were many things to be done. I had a gun, but Gigi did not know. I did not tell him, because I knew if I did he would be reluctant to look for another. We had to get a car. By that I mean we had to steal one. We had to find 2 other people to join us, but that we regarded as simple. We needed a competent driver though. Then we would need a day in which to show our driver and the other man the road and the stage of the crime. Back in KIRIAMITI, Gigi parked the car. But before we got out he asked me whether I had a particular person in mind who could join us, and I told him I had one. He then asked me if I could borrow a gun, and as I knew that this meant another share, I agreed to try my best, not forgetting to tell him to try too in case I failed. I did not want him to know I owned one, but he came to know some months later. It was on a Tuesday and we were to pull the job on Saturday. We decided to meet the following day at his place of work to work out the details. Back in my apartment, I took out my gun and loaded it. It carried 14 rounds. It now felt heavy. I had never used a gun before, but by the way I had seen it handled in films and by some other people I knew, I felt for sure that I could use it. I am not the type to stay with a thing and fail to know how it is used. I even learned how to dismantle it and to fix it back without anybody's instructions. I unloaded it again and put it in the box. There were still 3 days to go and hence no need to panic. The following day, at 11, I was at G's shop. He was not there but had left a message that I should meet him at KIRIAMITI bar at lunchtime. As I had an hour or so to myself, I decided to contact the man I had promised Kitenji that he would join us. He worked at New Ruadia and so it was not difficult to get him. He had been a driver with Kenya Bus Services for a period of time. He had been sacked for careless driving, but to me, he was the most competent driver I knew then. He had been a getaway driver in various robberies and many on the other side of the law knew him. At about 11:30, I was sitting with him in a private room discussing the matter. His name was Joseph Kigwasi, but we knew him in short as Kigwasi. After giving him the layout, I asked him to accompany me to KIRIAMITI bar to meet the rest of the boys. We saw Kitenji as he was descending the stairs and together we went to a private room in the bar. He introduced us to Laban Command, the international car thief. I needed not introduce my man as he was known by all of them, so we sat down to talk business. Command was a new person to me and I was surprised to hear that he knew about me. In a borrowed car we went to the scene of the intended robbery and after we were all satisfied we drove back. We decided that Kigwasi and Command should steal the getaway car while Kitenji and I would do all we could, to secure at least one gun, which was regarded as the best tool in such an operation. The following day, we met at around 3 o'clock in the same bar. Kigwasi and Command had secured a car, a Cortina 1600 GT. Kitenji had not yet got a gun but he had been promised one early the following day. On my side, I had been told to go for the one I was borrowing that same evening. We all agreed 2 guns were better than one. After settling all that, we decided to hold a final meeting on the 29th in the same bar at around 6 in the evening. We agreed that we should all sleep around the same place so that when the time came there would be no delay. That day we parted late and as I boarded a bus for Wood Street I felt uneasy. That night Millie had a lot of questions to ask me but I did all I could to evade them. Christmas was approaching. She had a lot of plans for it, but I had no penny in my pockets. If we succeed, her dreams will come true, but if we bungle it, that will be the end of me, I told myself. By now, she had known for sure that I was not employed at Hughes, but she did not know that I was a criminal. She believed I had some sort of business somewhere but was reluctant to let her know. That night, though I did not bother her, she did not know that I did not sleep. My mind was occupied on how I would use my gun for the first time and the amount I would get after pulling the job and getting away with it. In the morning, after she had gone to work, I managed to snatch a little sleep. I woke up at about 1 o'clock feeling tired and very hungry. I went to the bathroom, took a bath and after selecting a suit and dressing, I took a 20-shilling note that I found on the table and went to the nearest hotel for lunch. Back at home, I felt better. I took out the gun and some rounds of ammunition and put them in my pockets. There were 4 hours before our meeting and I needed something to keep me busy and to stop me from trembling. The weight of the gun and the ammunition in my pockets made me sweat. Not that they were heavy, but because of the sentence their possession alone carried. If I can sweat in my own room with nobody around simply because of carrying a gun, what will happen when I go among people? I asked myself. I prayed that I would not meet cops wherever I went, or I would get so scared that I would give myself away. I was reading a newspaper when Millie knocked at the door. I had heard a car stop outside, but I had not realized it was Millie who was being dropped. The knocking almost made me jump out of my skin. It was the cop's style of knocking, and it forced me to warn her against knocking in such a manner. I could see she was very surprised to see my fright, and I looked away. When something is slightly wrong with you, be sure that your wife will notice it immediately. I tried to cheer up after realizing my mistake in order to make her less suspicious, but it was useless. At 5:30 I told her I was going out to town and I might not come back as we had a meeting in Tika. She went with me as far as the bus stage, and as I boarded a bus she wished me good luck as if she knew I needed it. At Jami'i Bar I found the rest of the boys waiting for me. They were all ready with everything. They were drinking beer and they ordered a bottle for me. I really felt I needed one if I was to stop shivering and sweating at the same time. I ordered a brandy to see if it would make me a little braver, and it worked wonders. Then we decided to go and spend the rest of the night in Tika, and so we went to where Kigwasi had hidden the stolen car, and we set off for Tika. We parked the car at the back of 12th December Hotel. We decided it was advisable not to go around in a group of 4. We decided to split into twos until the following morning when we would meet at the same place. Gigi went with Kigwasi and Command with me. I had no money, and so before we parted I asked Gigi for some and he gave me 100 shillings, which was to be refunded immediately I got my share. There was a dance that night at Tika Social Hall and we went there. Before long, Command told me he did not feel safe there and we left immediately. I tried to take him from this place to that as I knew Tika inside out, but nowhere did he find rest. He was so uneasy that I felt very brave in comparison. At last we decided we should sleep and I took him to KIRIAMITI bar where I had earlier booked a double room. I was a little drunk and after undressing and placing the unloaded gun under the pillow, I immediately fell asleep. I woke up several times in the night after dreaming the police were knocking at the door, and each time, I found Command sitting on his bed covering his face with his hands as if supporting it from falling down or as if praying. That whole night Command did not sleep, and as we took breakfast he confessed to me he felt pretty bad. Outside KIRIAMITI I bought a Daily Nation newspaper and after briefly glancing at the headlines, I folded it and went to the place we had parked the car. The driver was there but Gigi was not. He told us that Gigi was waiting for us inside the hotel. We found him in a corner reading a newspaper. There was nobody near there, so we went over the final details. After making sure the white man arrived in the bank with his bag, we would give him about 15 minutes, then we would start off, ahead of him. We would go to the place we had selected and wait for him. Our car would be a few yards from the bumps facing the direction we had come from. Gigi, wearing a mechanics overall, would pretend to be working on the car's engine, so the bonnet would be open. He would be carrying his gun. Kigwasi, the driver, would be in the car pretending to be the stranded owner of the car. Command and I would be on either side of the road in the bush, and we would come out as soon as we heard a gunshot. We would force the white man to hand over the bag, and once in our possession we would all go into the car. I was to carry the bag and Command was to take the keys of the white man's car so that when we left, it would take him some time before he reached the phone or any help. By that time, we would be miles away. At about 9, we took positions outside the bank. At 10 o'clock the car arrived and a huge figure with a long mustache came out after parking. He looked tough all right. After 15 minutes we entered our car and set off towards his farm. We passed the scene we had selected for the setup to a place where the road was a little wider and turned our car. Back at the scene, we got out and after final instructions we took our positions. Command went to the left and I to the right. Gigi put on an overall and opened the bonnet. He then went into the boot and took out a jack, lifted the car in such a way that you would have noticed it at a distance and got busy working on it. The driver was inside, hidden by the bonnet so no one could see him from far. I lit a cigarette and as I smoked I took out my gun and loaded it. I was trembling and I hated myself for it, but when I thought of Command I felt braver. We waited for a considerable time. 2 cars passed, one from the farms and the other from town, but none of the people in both cars took any interest in us. At about 11:30 the car appeared. I could see it clearly from my position. I could also see Ketenji busy working on the car. A little distance away, the white man stopped and put out his head through the window as if he was suspicious. Then he seemed to think Gigi was harmless and at a slow speed he approached the trap. As the front wheels of the car left the bumps, Ketenji turned round, a gun in his hand. As soon as I heard the gunshot I jumped out of my position towards the car as a cat leaps towards a rat. The windscreen of the 404 broke into pieces. The white man's hands were in the air, his eyes wide open. He asked us not to shoot him but to take the whole cash. I took the money from the back seat and then turned to go into our car just a few yards away. Command had not taken the keys of the car and as we passed the car, he suddenly remembered, and Gigi asked our driver to stop. The driver stopped some yards from the white man's car and Command, a semi in his hand, went back to the white man who was still stranded in his car, too shocked to do anything. Suddenly we heard a gunshot that we had not expected, followed by a terrible cry from Command, and the roar of the car starting. I acted in a way I never thought I would. Before Command fell to the ground, I was out of the car, my gun in my hand. I shot 2 consecutive shots at the white man's car and the only results I got were the sound of the rear glass splintering into pieces. It was my first time to use the gun and I nearly dropped it because of its loud sound. It was louder than the white man's org.gs. As the car disappeared, I went to Command, who was trying to stand up in pain. He had a bullet hole in the center of his chest. I have never felt so angry in my life and had I caught up with that white man, I would have shot him at exactly the same point he had shot Command and I am glad right now that I did not reach him. All this happened in less than 40 seconds. As I helped him up, Ketenji came to aid me and we laid him on the rear seat of our car. As we did so, Kigwasi turned and in a soft voice in English said, "Let the dead bury the dead. One of these days he was going to die." Before I realized what I was doing, the pistol I carried was in my hand, pointing and pressing its mouth against his chest and with a voice I could not have recognized as my own, I told him, "Listen old boy, before you open that stinking mouth of yours to yap, think twice and be sure of what you want to say. Right now I'll feel content to shoot that stinking breath out of you. Can you explain why he was to die one of these days? I have known myself to lose my temper several times but never to that extent." Right then I felt like pulling the trigger. Ketenji exclaimed, "Sweet Jesus! What are you two doing? The white man will have reached the cops through the phone by the time we leave here. Relax young boy. What has Kigwasi's words to do with Command's death?" I put the gun back and in the next second we were busy on the road. I never forgot that driver's words even once in the 2 months that followed. Had I done something to make him sorry that same day, I would have felt a little bit contented. I must have been born of an unforgiving disposition. They say that to forgive a wrong is the best revenge, but then you shouldn't believe all what you hear. Before we reached Kahawa, Command was dead. We did not get any trouble on the way and after reaching Nairobi, we left the car with Command's body in it and we went away. What else could we have done? We did not know where he came from, we did not know his people and we did not know where he hung around. I for one did not know anything about him except what he had told me the day before his death. Ketenji knew Command's prostitute, but going to tell her that Command had been killed would mean asking for a hell of a lot of problems. We went to Ketenji's apartment in Jericho and locking ourselves inside, we got busy counting our take. It was the second time in my life to see so much money. It was twice as much as I had expected. Had I known Kaman's parents, I swear I would have taken his share to them. As it was, I had no idea and I was not about to go out investigating as I knew it would raise too many suspicions. After I took my share, including the gun's share, I left Ketenji's well-furnished apartment, my pockets bulging with 21,000 shillings. Some I put in the inside of my shirt and pushed it to the back. As I left the room, Ketenji called me. "Zalo." "Yes, mister," I said. "When things are as they are now, one is better off with his mouth shut. Keep cool until the heat is over. I thought you knew me better than that. If trouble comes, it will have been caused by either of you but not by General Zalo. I can assure you that, old-timer." So long," he said as I closed the door behind me. Opposite Jericho Hall I took a bus for town and at River Road I took another for Wood Street. Every minute I was in town seemed an untouched hour to me. I kept on feeling a finger of suspicion pointing at me. But whenever I turned, there was not a single soul behind me. After a few minutes I was back in my apartment, 21,000 shillings richer. Brother, to get money is tough, but to spend it is quite another story. Robbery is very risky. Drinking the whole day and doing other big things immediately after you get the cash is another risk, but most criminals don't realize it and never will. I spent my 21,000 shillings in that manner, and truly speaking, I never once uttered a word concerning the crime we had committed, and yet in 2 to 3 weeks' time the cops were looking for me day and night in connection with the crime. Kagwasi was already in remand awaiting trial. Millie was not at home, though I had not expected her to be, as she never came for lunch. I took out the gun and the money and arranged it in my suitcase. No one knew where I stayed, and so I was the least worried that someone would surprise me. The sight of all that money in my suitcase almost made me crazy. In the evening I heard an EAA car stop at the back of our apartment, and when I drew the curtains a little fraction, I saw Millie accompanied by another girl. What an odd day to bring home a visitor, I asked myself. She later introduced me to the girl as Miss Mary Mwanji, her former classmate and also working with EAA. She was to spend the night there as they had other arrangements for Sunday. To me, that night was one of the dullest for years. I did not talk much as they were engrossed in their Sunday arrangements, and to my surprise, I was at the center of their plans. In one place I was to pose as a husband of one and a brother of the other. Women, you never know with them. Anyway, they made me do it. There are times it pays to pose and other times when it does not, but that time, according to the girls, it paid surprisingly well. They needed my presence at Jericho Clinic. Well, to make a long story short, out of the 21 grand I had, I remained to remember only 5,000 shillings. I gave some to Millie to put in her account at the Bank of Baroda, which was to be robbed the following day, but after she had already received her receipt, the amount I paid for 1 year's house rent, the 2,000 shillings I sent home, and the amount I spent on fittings for Millie and myself. As for where the rest went, I guess East African breweries would explain better. Where they take people's money, no one can tell but themselves. Rumors were flying from this to that corner of the town that we had shot Kaman so as to get his share. Whoever had told them we were the ones in the job I did not know for sure, but I had a rough idea that it was probably Kaman's girl, who of course knew Ketenji and what he did for a living. The town was too hot for me and I avoided it as much as possible, and for a month, when it became hotter than iron, I ran out of Nairobi and came back only when my gains had started dwindling. Months passed since pulling off that job without my thinking of another big job. I was still with Millie, and the more I stayed with her the more I loved her. There surely must have been something she did to me to make me love her to that extent. Am I Shamba, for instance, or am I becoming a bit superstitious? And in all those years, she never conceived and I didn't like it. This clinic she had been visiting every now and then had something to do with it. I had enough money from the small jobs I had been pulling off almost every 2 months as I waited for the town to cool. Time passed, and as it cooled, I forgot that I was among the most wanted criminals in Nairobi. I would go out to town now and then, meeting my old friends who were now almost forgotten. There was one important thing that I learned at that time about forgetting. The sooner you forget a wrong you did in the past, the sooner you will do it again. This time, because of my forgetting that I was wanted, I got what was ahead of me. Chapter 5. It had just stopped raining when I woke up at around 8 one Sunday morning. Millie was about to go to church. She had asked me to take her out to town after Mass, and as I had other things I wanted to do before going out with her, I did not accompany her to Mass. Not that I ever went to church. In fact, I did not know much beyond our Lord's Prayer. I therefore asked Millie to excuse me and to meet me at Terrace Hotel. I met Captain Nguji, a friend of mine, and a man we had done a few things with, as I crossed Duke Street. He was with another man who looked every inch a cop. They asked me to a party they were going to hold in Small World Club. As I had other things to do, I asked them to excuse me for some time and promised them that I would join them as soon as I got free. I went to Kagondo Bar and was told that the man I wanted to see was not there. I always left my gun with that man whenever was drunk because I knew that I could easily be tempted to go opening bottles with it looking for fame. The man had an apartment in Kangemi, so I took a matatu and went there. I found his wife, who had arrived from home about a week before. She told me that her husband had gone in the morning to Banana Hill for some other business, and he had told her that he would not take long as he would report for duty before midday. So I waited. At about 11:30, he knocked at the door and came in. He was carrying a very large box that I later came to learn contained leopard skins because I was present when he sold them. When he saw me, he knew that I had gone for my gun, and after 5 minutes he went out for it. I took it and put it in the inside pocket of my coat, which I had made for that purpose, and some minutes later, we both boarded a bus for town. At the Terrace Hotel, at about 12:15, I saw Millie seated alone in a corner taking her lunch. I joined her and she ordered some lunch for me. She told me that what she wanted in town now had to wait until the next Sunday. She told me then that all she would want in town was to see the film Michael and Helga in Cameo Theater, as it was claimed to be very educative. I told her that the best time to go to a film was 6, and she agreed with me. I asked her to join me at the party I had been invited to that morning so it would be easy to pass time. We left Terrace Hotel and arrived at Small World Club at 1 o'clock. At the counter I asked the cashier, who knew me, where Captain's party was being held. He gave me a female waiter to show me where they were. As we went up she asked me, "Are you Jack Zalo?" "Yes, I am Jack Zalo." "What of it?" I retorted. "There is nothing to it. I was told by Captain to hang around here until you come. I have heard a lot about you." But instead of replying she looked at Millie, and I guessed that she thought it safer not to talk much in her presence. If there were two things Millie hated, one was to be in a bar and the other was prostitutes. You would have thought she would vomit the way she was looking at that girl. I had to persuade her to enter the club. We reached the room and we were welcomed pleasantly. There were 9 people around the table. Women outnumbered men by 1. I knew 3 of the men and I knew 4 of the girls. The other 2 were strangers to me. All the girls there were prostitutes, of course. 2 of them were barmaids, and 2 were some of those who were always going out to town in search of men. The men I knew were all criminals. As for the one I didn't know, I later came to know that he was an accountant in a certain bank in Nairobi. I knew then why the party had taken place. The man who looked like a cop was a sergeant in the army. An odd combination anyway. Captain and a friend of his were the party bosses. I could see by the way these whores were behaving that they had been instructed to give those visitors a good time. After introductions, we got busy drinking. For no reason at all I felt very uneasy. Everything that I drank turned to pure water without having any effect on me. I tried brandy, but all in vain. I felt my heart beating more rapidly than usual, and that was one of the few bodily signs I hated. They were discussing a very interesting topic, but that too could not make my heart rest. Millie was also deeply in it and she was the only one who was not taking any intoxicants. The way she hated prostitutes, I never thought she would ever sit on the same table with them. At about 3:30, a very well-dressed girl came in. She looked familiar but I couldn't place her. As she came to the table, I quickly glanced at Millie, who was busy writing something on a card. The girl greeted us all and at that moment, Millie looked up. The girl selected a seat and sat down. She did not seem new as she was known by some of the party. The one who was serving opened a bottle of beer for her, which she rejected and said she preferred a soda. She pushed the bottle of beer to me, though I was at the farthest corner from her. She showed some signs of liking me, which I feared most because of the presence of Millie. Just then I saw Millie push the note she had just written to me. No one else noticed except the new arrival who seemed to be taking more interest in me than was necessary. I read it silently, "Darling, let's go. I don't like this place and I can see you are not having fun." I took out my pen and wrote below her lines. "A very swell idea. We will leave at 4:30 sharp." I gave it back to her and it was only the new girl who noticed this. I could tell by her curiosity that she could have given anything to know what was on the card. After a few minutes, she asked, "Who is Jack Zolo among these 3 visitors we have here?" I felt my heart skip a beat. One of the other girls pointed at me and told her. "This one. Don't you remember him? He passed us at the door of Bamboo nightclub last night." She seemed very pleased to meet me. No one in the party seemed to be suspicious of her inquisitiveness and they even seemed to like it. She said she had longed to see me for a long time as she had heard a lot about me in the past. Prostitutes and criminals are alike. They like boasting much, though I didn't like it. If you have a prostitute and you happen to have a lot of money, her full day's work will be to boast that she is kept by a tough criminal. When a job is pulled, every prostitute knows which gang committed the crime. Criminals also did the same thing. Whenever they get money, the first place to go to is to those bars. There are certain bars that they frequent a lot. The same prostitutes are friendly to the cops. When the criminal is in, she is with the cops. When he comes out and because he has much money to waste, the girl goes back to him. And we never learn. Not unless you have gone through the amount of trouble I am already in. I knew that in those days I was the most talked about criminal because I was new and had gone into big money. So when this girl asked about me, I thought she wanted to win me for herself, though I still smelt a rat. She then stood up and said, "From now on, Zolo, every bottle of beer and whatever else you'll need will be paid for by me." She took out from her handbag a 100-shilling note and gave it to our server. "If he drinks and completes that, ask me for more," she said. She then went out as if for a short call. When she closed the door behind her, I asked the rest of the girls who she was. One said she was a common prostitute, the other said she worked in a certain bar in Jerusalem, and the third said that she sold MV perfumes. I was sure then that none of them knew for sure who she was. I felt more uneasy until I sent one of the girls to find out where the girl had gone. I opened another bottle with my teeth. I filled one glass and drank half of it. Millie was watching me very closely. She could see that I was far from my usual mood. At that time, her handbag was on her thighs and her watch said it was about 11:04. "Only a few minutes more, dear, and we shall be miles away," I told her, bending close to her ear. Suddenly, I saw the door open very slowly and at the same moment noticed a very ugly mouth of a machine gun protruding. I acted as quickly as lightning. I took out my gun with one hand while the other hand was opening the handbag on Millie's thighs, and as the door opened wide, I managed to put the rod there and press the buttons of the handbag. I told her, "If you are searched, just say it belongs to me." No one noticed what I did except Millie, for they were all facing the door. Then the holder of the machine gun came into the room. He looked at us one at a time and the machine gun lastly rested on me. He had a cop's face all right. He told me, "Jack Zolo, you with a three-piece suit and a red necktie, you are the one we are after. Then two others came in and seeing where the machine gun pointed, they followed suit. Put your hands behind your head and hold them together. Then turn round slowly and face the wall. I did so without the slightest hesitation. I know the times when I am beaten, and this was one of them. One of the cops came to me and searched me expertly and satisfied that I was not loaded, went a few steps away from me. Then I heard a voice of a new arrival ask, "Is he the one?" "Yes, sir." He talked to me. I turned and saw he was a police inspector. I was then ordered to get out of the room, and as I passed him I heard the machine gun man ask him, "What about the rest, sir?" The inspector said, "Well, I don't think the rest are involved. We got the one we had come for, leave them alone." I was glad then, for I knew Millie would not be arrested. Without the rod, the case against me was not half as serious as it would have been. Outside the door, there were three more uniformed policemen. One had a pistol hanging from his waist. When he saw me coming he held it in his hands as if waiting for an order to eliminate me. There were two patrol cars and I was ushered into one under heavy guard. As we started moving, the other car followed us. I looked out of the windows to try and see if I could see Millie for the last time. She was not there. Within a short time I was in a police cell in Central Police Station. I knew that the girl had wanted to make sure I was Jack Zollo so that she could pass positive information to the police. In the cell I met three other people, two of them nattily dressed and one shabbily dressed. I was very annoyed with myself for not taking action as soon as I had felt uneasy. Why didn't I agree to go away as soon as Millie wrote the note to me? I asked myself. I sat in a corner by myself. I had no particular need of hearing what the rest were saying. I remembered all the crimes I had committed since I ran away from home. I remembered how often I had been warned by friends that I was one of the most wanted criminals, remembered all the fingerprints that had been detected from the so many cars I had broken into, recalled all the people who had mentioned my name to the police when they were arrested. Now, here I was locked in a police cell in Central Police Station awaiting almost 101 cases, and most of them needed no more evidence than the fingerprints that had been detected. How shall I account for all those? I asked myself. They know me by the name of Jack Zollo, so I must not admit that name. From now onwards I'll be Albert Wanjoe, I concluded. At about 5:30, my cell was opened. They called loudly for Jack Zollo, but I did not answer, though I almost did. When no one answered, the constable went away as he did not know who Zollo was. Then one of the constables who was present at my arrest came. He looked so annoyed that I thought he would burst. He opened the cell and pointed at me, then asked, "Aren't you the one we've just brought in?" "I am the one, yes." "Then why didn't you answer, when this officer called you?" "He didn't call me. He opened there and called someone else, and when he was satisfied that he is not here he went away." "Aren't you Jack Zollo?" "No sir, I am Albert Wanjoe, but you are the one we have just arrested, isn't it?" "I am not very sure about that. I was arrested about 2 hours ago." "Yes, you are the one. Come out immediately and follow me." So I followed him. I was taken into an office where I found 6 people sitting round a table. 2 of them were uniformed, a superintendent and the chief inspector who arrested me. I was given a seat opposite them, but 2 constables stood behind me. One of them talked. "Sir, this man says his name is not the one you had given me." When he was called by the name he didn't answer. He was telling this to the chief inspector, who then turned to me and asked, "You say your name is not Jack Zollo?" "It is not, sir." "What's your name then?" "Albert Wanjoe." "Let's see your identity card." "I don't have one." "And your driving license?" "I don't have one either." "I don't even know how to drive." "You are not a driver?" he asked in a surprised voice. "And we hear you are one of the smartest getaway drivers. Think twice before you open that mouth of yours. You might admit it after a hard time, young boy. Just talk while you have time." "I am telling you the truth, sir." Then one of the civilian-clothed cops took out a photo and threw it across the table to me and asked me whether I knew whose it was. To my great surprise, it was one of my photos. How they had come across it was, for a while, beyond my knowledge. Then I remembered I had taken out 6 copies of the particular copy. It was passport size and 2 had gone to different friends. One had been shot in action and one was in prison. It was likely that it was in the possession of the dead one. Giving them those copies was one of the fatal mistakes I've ever made in my bloody life. At the back of the photo was scribbled the name Jack Zollo in a writing I knew I would refuse to recognize as having ever seen. I threw the photo across the table back to him. He asked me, "Is that your photo?" "Yes it is, sir." "And is that your name on the back?" The SP asked me. "That name is not mine, sir." I then saw him look behind me, and before I could guess what he was up to, I felt a heavy blow on the right jaw, and the next second I was on the floor. I would not even think of screaming. Every part of my body was receiving repeated strokes. Wherever they got whips from was beyond my knowledge, but they were the ones working on me. I could not cry out even if I wanted to. After 2 minutes, which seemed to me like years, they stopped to ask me if I would alter my statement. "Are you beating me to death just to admit a name that doesn't belong to me?" In that position I could see a board with some photos pinned on it. It carried a list of the most wanted people. Each photo had a name below, and on the second line I saw the name Jack Zollo. There was no photo. Then I remembered the photo I had just seen had a very tiny hole at the top. They noticed my interest and I was deprived of it with a stroke. "Are you Jack Zollo or not?" I said. "I am not. If I were, I would say so. What has a name got to do with my arrest?" Then it started all over again, but this time a bit harder. I lost consciousness. When I regained it, I could hear very distant voices talking. They became clearer and clearer as I recovered wholly. They asked me again, but I did not reply. I was so annoyed that I had decided not to talk anymore. If they thought the body they were working on could speak, then I would also wait to hear it talk. After a short time I was taken back to my cell. And that was the price I paid for the name Albert Juan Joey. I did not discuss my case with anyone in the cell, as most people do when locked in, trying to find solutions. One thing, I did not know why I was arrested. I had committed so many crimes and it was hard to know which had resulted in my arrest. Again, even if I thought of employing an advocate, it would be a waste of money. No advocate could explain why my fingerprints were found on over 10 tourist cars where property had been stolen. No advocate could tell the court why my fingerprints were found on the driver's mirror on a car stolen outside the University College, later abandoned after committing a robbery in Westlands. No one could talk for me out of the fact that a semi possessing my fingerprints was found at the scene of robbery in Westlands. There were many others, some even worse. So the only solution was to escape. But how was I to do it? Bribery was out of the question. Fighting it out was also out. Running out of the crowded court would mean asking for a load of bullets in my spinal cord, a request the police never turned down. So what do? I asked myself. This is what I'll do, I answered myself. I'll meet my problems bravely, wisely, and calmly, and by doing so I'll make my life easier. The following morning I was called out and had my fingerprints taken. At midday a parade was held outside the cells and I was asked to select the position I wanted. Taking off my coat and giving it to someone else, I selected a position between 2 men of my size. The European I had already forgotten about, for it was a long time since we robbed him, came. He did not go far. These white people have sickening memories. All those years and he could not forget my look. Instead of touching me the way he had been instructed to by the chief inspector in charge of the parade, he gave me a heavy blow that felled me. I felt for my gun where I used to keep it so as to shoot him to hell, but it was not there. They even read my thoughts, for such a remark was made by the inspector. The white man then went out. "What do you say about the identification, Albert?" the inspector asked me. "What can I say? Wasn't it meant to identify me? I never saw that idiot in my life. At least I noticed that my name had stuck, though it wasn't all that important anymore. I am going to write on this form your exact words. They might be brought up as evidence against you if you don't take care. Write every word you jolly well please, and don't forget to write how that colonialist behaved. It might be the cause of my being rude. 2 more parades for various robberies were conducted, but all the people were new to me and none picked me out. In the late afternoon, the white man we had robbed in Tika was brought. He identified me as one of the 4 people who had robbed him of his money. Funny how the police work. They'll never give you rest if they really mean to go after you. So I was accused of the 2 robberies, but all the same, I knew more cases were ahead of me. Millie brought me some milk, bread, cigarettes, and soda for lunch. She was crying so much that she could not tell me anything. It was her first time to have someone related to her taken to a police station. She was also shocked, for she was now sure I was a criminal because of the gun I had dumped into her handbag. I told her that I would be taken to court the following day, and from the court I would be remanded in custody, so if we did not get more time to talk, she could visit me in custody. I did not know where I would be taken. The following morning I was taken to court number 18, where I was put in the dock. Albert Juan Joey, you are accused that on such and such a date, with others not before the court, jointly armed with a pistol and some, as you robbed Mr. Margraves of Lavaswool Limited of 33,000 shillings, and in doing so you used violence, which is contrary to section 296 of the Penal Code. Do you agree with the charge? No, I don't do such things, I answered rudely. The second charge was read to me, and after pleading not guilty, the judge went on. Okay, your case will be heard on February 3rd next year. You will therefore be remanded in Comité maximum security remand until then. Your case will come for mention on November 14th this year. Before I could open my mouth to try and defend myself, I was pulled out of the dock. As I was being shown to the door out of the court, I saw Millie standing up, her hands hiding her weeping face. She really was sharing my troubles. While I was being taken to the ground floor, I asked Millie whether she had heard where she would come to see me, but all she could manage was a nod in reply. I told her to take it easy and went away. The cells are underground, and so we had to go downstairs. Those remanded in custody were put together. They did not scrutinize the offenses, so I was put together with drunkards, vagabonds, impersonators, or forgers. Some also had come from remand for the mention of their cases. So we were many. I had 300 shillings on me, and I offered 50 shillings for food. We sent a warden who was kind enough, and he brought us our orders. I supplied the food to all without caring who was who, as I felt I had no more need for money, for I was sure that that was the end of my freedom for the next 30 years. That very day, over 5 people had been convicted on different cases of robbery, and none had got away with less than 18 years in prison. What worried me even more was the fact that none of them had more than one offense. Furthermore, they had robbed without using any weapons. How many years would I get, I who had robbed using deadly weapons? I nearly hit the ceiling. At 12, more drunkards were ushered in, those who could not afford to pay their fines, or who found it better to go into prison for 1 or 2 months than to pay 60 to 100 shillings out of their pockets. Some were still drunk and did not even know what was going on. I got an idea. I would try to escape. I would call out for a warder and ask to be allowed to go and pay my fine. I would use the name of one of the drunkards, and since those who took fines did not know any of us, I might get away with it. If I was caught, that would make no difference, since I was going to be imprisoned anyway. So I approached one of the drunkards who was getting a little bit sober. I pretended that I was waiting to be called. I introduced a good conversation and tried to be friendly. Then I told him I had some cash, and if he would agree to refund the money once we were out, I'd go and pay for him. We both agreed, and agreed on where we would meet after leaving the cells. After getting his name, I called the warder in charge. The man had been fined 60 shillings, and his name was Jadiel G. Shoya. I was therefore taken from the underground cells to the floor where the fines were being paid. 2 people were paying their fines. The warder was still behind me holding the files of Jadil Gishoya. I took out 60 shillings and held the money. Every minute that passed seemed to me like a full hour. At long last, the warder handed over my file, but the clerk first stared at me as if he was suspicious. Or maybe my fear told me so. We were standing on the corridor. At the far corner I saw a senior prison officer coming towards us accompanied by the chief inspector who was in charge of my identification parade. I looked the other way so he would not recognize me. When they reached where we were they stopped and the prison officer started talking to the clerk about a certain person who had escaped without paying his fine. He gave the officer some files and I heard him mention a name. The officer went away after warning the clerk to take care in the future. I was already sweating. Some yards from us another chief inspector from Central Police Station met them. They stopped. I heard the inspector ask the prison officer about the files belonging to Albert Wanjoe who was to be taken to Kamatai Remand Prison to await his trial. This inspector said he wanted it changed for they wanted to remand this Wanjoe in police custody for they had just got other reports about him and he had to be taken to Nakuru for further identification. He would also help them identify some other criminals who had been arrested early that morning in Nakuru and who had just been brought to Nairobi. There's no objection to that, the SP said. Only make sure you bring him to the court when the time of mentioning his case comes. Let's go down and see. So they all went down the stairs towards the cells. I took out a handkerchief and wiped off the sweat flowing on my face. The clerk then started working on Gishoya's file. I put the 60 shillings notes, which had almost turned wet in my hands, on the table. He counted them and put them in a drawer. He acted as if he was doing everything to deliberately delay me. I was now sure that if the officers had gone straight to the cells, they were already there, calling my name. But I guessed that they had to go for my files from the SPS office. Not that it would take long. The telephone bell rang. The clerk put down his pen. He talked and talked as if he did not want to put the phone down. I could hear the distant voice of a girl asking to be taken out for lunch. The clerk, winking to himself, agreed and told her to wait for him outside the courts in 3 minutes' time. I thought he wanted to postpone my paying the fine until 2, but instead he now took his pen and worked as a computer. I blessed the girl for waking up this women-hungry clerk. I was given my receipts and the warder escorted me to the door. I crossed the road and moved as if I had forgotten my life someplace and I was afraid that someone might steal it. Some distance away from the court I looked back. I was sure something very nasty had started. At the main entrance, I saw 2 police inspectors and the senior prison warden with a hell of a lot of other cops. They had already discovered my trick and were trying to see whether they could see me around and take me back. They were wrong. Well, to hell with what they'll do with Jadil Gishoya, I concluded as I disappeared. Opposite Tusker House, I boarded a bus for Wood Street. My heart beat faster than usual. My temperature was very high for I was not feeling well. I saw that the curtains to my apartment were slightly drawn and I knew then that Millie had not gone to work. I knocked at the door twice and it opened. Millie stood there surprised, as if she was staring at a ghost. She didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. All she could manage to do was to open her mouth wide, saying nothing. This was one of those times when someone clearly sees better with her mouth. When she finally recovered, she allowed me to enter. She was now able to talk. I could see that her eyes were swollen because of crying. "How is everything, Millie? Any trouble since I went? As if you don't know that I have not reported on duty for 2 days, is there anything I can do about it?" "Yes, phone them and give them an excuse. If I do it myself I'll be asked endless questions." I went into the bathroom and after taking a shower I changed into another suit. I also took a pair of goggles and put them on to disguise myself a little. When I was ready, I told Millie to go with me to the telephone booth, in Section I. At Mirangini bar she gave me her boss's number and I dialed. A moderate English female voice answered. Hello, East African Airways, can I be of service to you? That is his secretary, that means he is not around, Millie told me. Leave him a message. Yes please, I continued. Can I talk to your boss? Sorry he is not around. He has gone out for lunch. Sure, I should have thought of that. Can you take his message? I would be pleased to if you don't mind. Okay, tell him this. Miriam Niambui has been sick for the last 2 days. She couldn't notify him and there was no one she could ask to send a message. I arrived today and found her seriously ill in bed. This is the first thing she asked me to do. Rest assured that I'll pass the message and send my best wishes to her. Tell her it is Eva, who, just Eva. She'll know right away. Thanks. I'll also ask her to let me thank you personally. You sound very kind. I've got to sound kind on the phone, that is part of my training, so I am likely to meet a different person from what I expect. I don't think you'll get the chance. So long. She hung up and I hung up too. I had forgotten Millie's presence while I was talking to Eva. Instead of meeting a smiling face, I met a sad one. As I left there I knew I would never be allowed to meet Eva and I did not care either. I did not feel safe at the bar as I feared I might meet a person who knew me. I told Millie we should go back home immediately. I was hungry because I had not eaten more than half a loaf of bread for the period I had been in police custody. Back home I was given a heavy lunch which I really enjoyed. Millie was a very good cook, in fact. After that I went to the bedroom to rest my limbs for the first time in 2 days. I had not slept for more than 3 hours, so I was feeling sleepy and very tired. Millie followed me into the bedroom after washing the dishes, but by that time I was in dreamland. I woke up at 7:30 feeling tired, but after a shower, I felt surprisingly well. I was given supper which I ate with a good appetite. Millie liked that. Where's the thing I put in your handbag? I asked Millie, who, instead of replying, went to the kitchen and came with it. Women are funny. Did you get trouble anywhere? No, I came home straight. I didn't even say goodbye to your friends in the bar. But yesterday on Government Road, I saw the girl who gave you away. She entered Coney Pot restaurant. She was lucky I didn't get near her, I'd have ripped her into pieces. Forget all about her. She is a policewoman and that is her duty. It was all my fault. I should not have gone there had I followed your wishes. Anyway, she'll live to regret it one day. What happened at the court? I was planning to come to see you in Kamatai tomorrow. I don't even know the way there, to be frank with you, Millie, as you are the only person I can trust. I escaped, and I guess right now every policeman and policewoman is on the lookout for me. If I am caught, I guess I'll be shot on sight. Then I told her the story of how I managed to escape. She listened very patiently, and when I had finished she asked me, "What are you proposing now? Will you be patient enough to stay indoors until they forget about you? That is one of the problems that I have, but before tomorrow morning I'll have a solution." Then she brought up a problem she had not raised since we started living together. "I want us to wed Jack. We can't stay this way any longer. My mother is also pressing me about it. I know if we don't marry soon, one of these days we will both regret it. I might be in the family way and might very easily lose my job. I guess you already know I can't lose it if I am Mrs. Somebody. I want you to think about it before you think of anything else. I haven't met your parents yet. If by bad luck now you were imprisoned, where could I go? I am always telling my mother that I know your parents and I hate repeating the lie. Consider that before anything else. When problems start, they follow each other as if they had been called for. The idea of getting out of town for a time was the one that had occupied my mind. Now here was another just introduced and which obviously clashed with the first one. I was proposing to run away for a while and she was proposing a wedding. What was I to do? Vote on it? No. Even if the vote came out in favor of a wedding, I could still overrule it. There was therefore no need of voting. Slow and sure wins the race, so I would talk to her slowly. I couldn't sleep, and even if I wanted to, Millie was not giving me time to. She pressed on about the wedding. But I had already decided. I would get out of the town for some time, say 6 months. By that time the police would have met boys so much tougher than Zalo, that I'd have become a once-upon-a-time story. I told Millie. Look here, Millie, you know without my telling you of my affection for you. Now supposing we made arrangements for a wedding and I got arrested on the eve of the wedding day, could you stand such shame? If at present you are not in the family way, there is still plenty of time for us to arrange things. If I don't take care, the next time you hear about me, I'll be rotting in prison, which I am sure you wouldn't like. For your information, almost every cop in this town has my photo and is looking for me. You know too that I cannot stay indoors for a period of even 1 month, and if I do our neighbors here will become suspicious and there might be a leakage. Surely, it is better that I be 1,000 miles from you but safe instead of being 13 miles from you in Komitai, but a helpless prisoner, deprived of all my rights. While free we could arrange to meet somewhere secretly and do what we want together no matter how far I may be. There is nowhere I can go in this big world further than 30 years imprisonment. If you don't know, that is how long I'll be imprisoned when I am caught on my unlucky day. I think the best thing is for me to get out of this town for a certain period of time, not less than 6 months. I shall be in touch with you, and as you have a job that pays well, you will push on well. You will miss me, yes, but not as much as you'd miss me if I went behind the bars for 30 years. So let us skip the subject of wedding. If you don't see my point, we will follow yours, but I am quite sure we shall later be sorry about it, I concluded. I could see by her reaction that I had won the battle. Where are you proposing to go? I thought they planted policemen everywhere. Which is that place without cops? I could get out of Kenya for a while. She was surprised. That idea had not occurred to her. Get out of Kenya? I guess you are overreacting or you are crazy. Where to? I could go to Zambia or to Congo. I will never forget you wherever I go. It is not a question of forgetting me. I am worried about your safety. How can you manage to stay in another country where you have no one who knows you or can help you? Did I say I want to go away to look for help from anybody? I want to go to a place where nobody knows me. Whom do I depend on here except you? I can also find another you there, I said jokingly, but she did not like the joke. You aren't fully decided then? Zambia or Congo, which is which, one of the two, and can't I be told? I haven't gone yet. I'll write when I reach where I'll go. My question is, do you agree with my proposition, or are we going to talk about it until tomorrow morning? My watch told me it was about 1.5 hours past midnight. I don't think I can do without you. I'll be very lonely then. In that case all I have been talking about can be termed as useless. Sorry, I didn't mean it that way. I do agree with you, but do me one favor before you go. What is it? If you are sure it won't ruin any of us, I am ready to. I want you to go to your home and bring me 2 of your relatives, your youngest brother and sister. The 2 you told me are in lower primary. Once they are here, I'll arrange everything else concerning their education. Also find me a maid there and come with her. With those here I'll be able to wait for you for as long as you don't think it's safe for you to come back. The favor she wanted meant that I would have to stay a few more days in Kenya, which I detested. Things always go wrong at the 11th hour, and I have been aware of that for a long time. But I decided that if that was the only favor she wanted, I had no objection. It would relieve my mother the burden of school fees for 2. Okay Millie, I agree with you. I'll have them come here and soon after I'll be off. Thank you. I only wish you a swell time. Are you going on duty tomorrow? Or should I phone your boss? No, there is no need. The message you left yesterday is enough to give me off duty for a week. I'll report back there when those 2 kids you are bringing are in school. I am going to St. Teresa's to see the headmaster about it. Which classes are they in? I am not sure. You'll know for sure when they come, but my guess is, the boy is in STD 2 and the girl is in STD 3. This time tomorrow they will be here. Remember, it is a burden you are placing on yourself. You may regret it later. That's nonsense. Anyway, let it be my business. Your only part in it is to bring them here as soon as possible so that I may resume my duties. Chapter 6. The following morning we woke up as usual. Millie wanted to go to St. Teresa's to see the headmaster, and I wanted to go out to see a friend of mine who owned a Volkswagen saloon car. I wanted to borrow it so as to go home in it at night. At the same time I wanted to see a certain Sikh in town who modified stolen cars, for I wanted him to tell me how much he would charge me to change the color of a car, the number plates, and the road license. At New Stanley Hotel, where my friend Munin, the owner of the Volkswagen, worked, we talked for 30 minutes. I would take his car at 6 from his home in Ofafa, Jericho. That settled, I went straight to the Sikh. I reached there as he parked his car outside his garage. We had met many times before, so he now took my hand and directed me to his office. We sat down and I lit a cigarette. "How are you, Mota? For so long." "I am pretty fine and pushing on with my job, I see. I've got a little problem. I want you to modify a car for me. Give it new number plates, road license, and whatever else you think is necessary. I want it for traveling a long journey." "What make?" "I am thinking of a Volvo. Have you got it ready?" "No, but that won't take me 2 days. Are you running out of this country or is it for sale?" "I am not selling it. I want to have it for a period of time, say about 1 to 2 years. Then I get rid of it." "Do this." "I would have charged you 2,000 shillings cash, but I'll give you an alternative. I need a Volkswagen car, a saloon, not very old. If you don't have a place to go for it, I'll show you an Indian who keeps his carelessly. By the time you bring it, your Volvo will be so ready and good with everything that you'll not be able to recognize it yourself. Do I make myself clear?" "Very clear, in fact, Mota. Today or tomorrow I'll bring one of the cars, the following day I'll bring the other. On Friday, I want to be as far away as the Volvo can take me. And just for asking sake, who is that careless Indian? He always parks outside Liberty Cinema. No one will notice you, I am sure. I have been looking around there several times. He even leaves it there when going home. They use it on the cinema business only. Most of its drivers are African, so you wouldn't look suspicious. I can assure you that." I took out a bunch of master keys and the Sikh showed me the one that is most suitable for Volkswagens. "Okay, I'll see what I can do about it today or tomorrow," I told him and stood up. He wished me good luck and I went away. He knew I needed good luck if I was to survive. I looked at my watch as I reached outside and saw it was 10:30. I was holding a folded umbrella and a raincoat with a hat in my left hand. I had carried them as I was sure it would rain. I entered Jevanji Gardens and walked across towards Mocha Restaurant. Soon heavy drops of rain started falling. I unfolded my raincoat and put it on. I buttoned its hat so that only my eyes remained uncovered. That was one of the things I liked most at the time. I wanted the weather to remain that way, and I wished the rain would fall continuously for as long as it wanted. I felt completely disguised that way. I was thinking of the 2 cars I was to steal. If it is possible, I would like to go home sure that the Sikh is working on my Volvo after having taken a Volkswagen to him, I told myself. I decided to go and see the car which he told me was always parked outside Liberty Cinema. One thing I was sure of was that if an Indian gave you a secret about another Indian, he must be sure of it. I had dealt with many and whatever they had told me always turned out to be true. I believed for sure that the Volkswagen he had told me about was actually there, and that if I went there, good results would certainly follow. He had given me the car's registration number so it wouldn't be hard for me to identify it. Within 45 minutes I was standing outside Liberty Cinema reading the posters for the film showing and for the next attraction. I had already seen the car parked between another Volkswagen of the same color. It rained so heavily that not many people crossed the roads or went from here to there. The place was very quiet. There were people on the opposite side sheltering themselves, but no one seemed interested in the cars. I watched everyone in sight until I was satisfied that everyone was busy in their own businesses. I felt for my master keys and selected the one the Sikh had recommended for Volkswagen cars. A tall brown man in a raincoat smiled at me as he passed me, but I didn't smile back. I guessed he smiled because we both had the same type of raincoats and umbrellas. It was a coincidence which would have made anybody, even a fool, smile, but not a person who was about to risk his life stealing a car. I opened my umbrella and went into the rain towards the car. The key fitted and I entered without looking around. I inserted the ignition key and checked the petrol gauge and found it had enough petrol. I switched on the wipers, and when the windscreen was clear I reversed the car, then shot off. No one raised an alarm, and so I slowly drove out of Pangani towards the city center. The roads were not very busy, so I drove at an average speed to Mota Singh's garage. It was still raining heavily, so I was sure it was hard to meet anyone who would know the car and look at it suspiciously. I used the back door, and when I hooted twice, Mota Singh himself opened the iron door for me. I parked the Volkswagen where I was directed to, and by the time I took out the ignition key, his boys had already started working on most of the car's body. I was surprised to see how they worked. I stood there, my mouth wide open, and within less than 15 minutes, the car was no longer light blue. Their working speed was incredible. Mota just stood by me smiling broadly. I guessed he was enjoying the way his boys worked. The old number plates were now nowhere to be seen. He then took me by my right hand and once again we sat in his office. He certainly liked my piece too. "Did you meet any suspicious person anywhere?" he asked me after a short silence. "No, in fact, it was a very easy job. The rain played the best part. If I knew right now where I'd get the type of Volvo I am interested in, I'd go for it now. Let me see," the Singh said and bit his tongue slightly, as if turning over matters in his head. I started thinking of the biggest car parks in town and the places where the best cars could be found. I thought of Ambassador Hotel lastly and decided I'd go and try there. Then the Singh stroked his finger and told me, "You have done a good job for me and I feel I owe you something. Do you know Exotica, that place they call Coffee House?" "Yes, Coffee House." I said I knew it. So he continued to tell me, "A friend of mine left his Volvo there. I was talking with him this morning. He is leaving for the UK next week and he is selling that car. Frankly speaking, he didn't buy that car, so it isn't any loss to him if it is also stolen. It hasn't traveled even for 1 year. It is new and I am sure it will give you the best service you need. Try and see whether you'll get him." I stood and told him that I would be back any time. I guess my star was still up. If I slip, I thought, it will be the end of me. At Exotica I saw the car. I felt a lot of heat in my body and I wondered why that should happen while it was raining so heavily. I looked this way and that way and, satisfied that there was nobody around, I went to the car and stood by it. I was holding my umbrella, partly protecting myself from the heavy rain and partly protecting myself from being seen. Ever seen a child hiding his face with his fingers or closing his eyes thinking he would not be seen? That is what I had done. Or do you think an umbrella could hide a structure standing beside a car? As I opened the door, I felt a heavy arm rest on my shoulder. "What are you up to, mister? Whose car is this you have just opened?" I looked at his hard face. He looked as if he would swallow me in one gulp. He was thick-set, about 5.5 feet tall, and looked like a light heavyweight boxer. I judged right then that if I tried being tough, I didn't stand the slightest chance. He swung me round and pushed me, and my umbrella fell down. Two people who had just parked their car some yards from us stopped to see what was going on. I picked up my umbrella as the thick-set man came at me again. "I'll take you to the police right now for attempting to steal my car. Come on, enter here." I did that without any questions, for I wanted us to get away from that place because people had started crowding. Some were saying I should be taken out and be beaten, but the Indian did not take notice of them. If you try anything, I'll work on you before we get to the police station, or stop the car and shout out that you are a car thief. So if I were you, I'd keep still. He started the car and then turned it to find his way to the nearest police station. A police 999 car passed by and my heart skipped a beat as he tried to stop it. I was not trembling at all, even though I knew that if he took me to the police I would go in for good. Then I suddenly remembered what the Singh had told me about the car not being legal, and I felt braver. I asked him, "What are you planning to do to me? I am taking you to the police." "Why? What have I done to you?" "Yes, I'd have stolen your car, I don't deny that, but you still have it. Let me go my way and I will never attempt it again." "Shut up. You are the ones who have terrorized this town by stealing cars. You are going in anyway, so stop tales." When I was sure he meant to take me to the police, I tried the card I had kept close to my chest. "Listen, I know who you are and I had come to steal this car under instructions. One thing I am sure of is that you are leaving Kenya for the UK next week." I looked at him closely to see his reaction, which was so visible I could have noticed it even without looking at him. He parked the car at an angle on Kamatha Street, looked at me and asked, "Who instructed you to steal?" "Someone who knows you also stole it a few months ago. Someone who knows everything in this car is fake or forged, so if you take me to the police, both of us will either be in or I'll leave you there, and it is very likely that I'll leave you there. Therefore it is for you to decide. Mine is attempted stealing while yours is stealing plus forgery." He had now turned white, but I didn't give him time. I made up a few other things from nowhere which I could see hit the mark, for he started trembling. It was still raining and the streets were busy with traffic. I felt safer seeing people around, for I could tell by the way he looked scared he could try anything to avoid blackmail. I had also seen his name on a receipt that was hanging from the glove compartment, and when I told him his name, he became even more frightened. I told him I knew the real owner of the car and that it had been stolen within a short time after the owner had bought it. I also said I knew for how long he had stayed with the car. Having pressed him that much and noticing the incredible fear showing in him, I decided to give him a few minutes to sweat it out, thinking. I knew for sure that if I opened the door and went away, he wouldn't interfere with me. I knew too that if he interfered with me, it would certainly not be in the way of telling me to go with him to the police. He was now having a hard time and I was not going to let him get away with it. Just imagine. He knew he had stolen that car and yet he was ready and willing to take me to the police for only attempting to steal it from him. To let him get away with it for nothing was to act foolishly. He sighed deeply and then he looked at me. "What do you propose? I quite understand you are well informed and I believe you were sent to get me, but tell me, what do you want to do? I am stopping the first 999 car that comes here. You were taking me to the police, yet you knew you are a thief too. You didn't know I knew the much I do and a lot more that the police will like to hear. I am sure that your story will not stick, but mine will. Whenever you see that somebody is merciless, show him no mercy either, and I mean what I say. If ever you are asked to fetch a coward, just go round the town looking for a guilty Indian and I assure you that you'll win the first prize." Right then, this one was trembling so much that the window glasses where his right arm rested vibrated loudly. Every element in his body showed fear. At the same time I was not forgetting the fact that I was blackmailing him. One thing I was sure of was, even if I hit him on the face right then, he could not hit back. He was completely at my mercy. He looked at me again and said, "Listen, young man, we can understand each other without inviting trouble. I am quite aware that I am already beaten. Forget about the fact that I would have taken you to the police, just tell me what you want. Please leave the police out of this, okay? You agree that this is not the first car you have stolen, don't you?" "Yes." You also agree that if we go to your home right now with the police, they will recover some other things that will put you into even more trouble." "Well, like what? You are not licensed to carry a gun, or are you?" To my surprise I saw him look at the left-hand side of his inner coat pocket where he had a gun. I too looked there wide-eyed and frowning as if I was indicating its position, and he stared vacantly in the air, opening his mouth wide. I believe most people see with their mouths better when surprised, shocked, frightened, or delighted. Well, I agree you know too much and can ruin my life, but let's come to an understanding. Is there anything I can do to make you forget all that? I will tell you what. I was not intending to steal your car. I was opening it to wait for you inside it, as I didn't know for how long you would stay in the hotel. I have been watching you for some hours, and the time I wanted to talk to you I saw a Singh come to you. You talked for some time and he went away. I have been paid to ruin you. I have a brother in the police force and I have been instructed to tell him everything. Anyway, I know more about you than you'd even guess. Before acting I decided I should let you know, but before I got you in a good corner you got the better of me. I am getting 3,000 shillings if I put you in. I have been given 1,000 shillings already, and the rest too will come when you are in. Do you understand me? But why doesn't the one who employed you go to the police himself, or just phone instead of employing someone for such a fee? He told me he is very close to you, and according to their custom, if you personally harm a close friend or a relative of yours you'll either die very painfully soon or run mad. When you employ somebody, his blood won't harm you. He is a Singh, anyway. I added that to lend my statement some weight, and it did. He nodded his head several times, meaning that he knew who had sent me. I was sure he did not mean Mota Singh, otherwise I would have committed a bad sin. Tell me what you want then. I have other things to do. Do you want to tell me you are buying me off? That I should not continue with it? Yes, of course, if we understand each other, that is okay. The first thing I want is this car. You haven't bought it, so there will be no loss on your side. The other thing is, I want double the amount I was to be given after completion of my mission. Brother, whenever you ask for anything, ask for double. You may surprise yourself and get it. When I told the Indian what I wanted, I had thought he would jump up in shock, but believe it or not, he took out a pouch from the inner pocket of his coat and he gave me 4,000 shillings. He then left the ignition key in its place, opened the car, and after wishing me good luck, walked away. It was my turn now to see with my mouth. For not less than a minute, I stayed there holding 4,100 shillings, then realizing my mistake, I put it in my pocket and took the driver's seat. I set the car in motion, and in 3 minutes' time I was in Mota Singh's garage. The rain was still falling heavily as I left the garage going to take a bus for Wood Street. I had passed the hardest test. I arrived in Wood Street at about 3. I was very hungry, but the weight of the money I had obtained for nothing and the fact that I had secured the car of my dream made me forget my hunger. Millie was not there, so I went in the kitchen and fetched myself some food. When I finished eating, I left the plate on the table and went to the bedroom. I counted my money again and was sure that I had 4,100 shillings. I lifted the pillow and put it under. I then took off my coat and hung it on the wall, then lay on the bed with my shoes still on. Many thoughts concerning my safari so occupied every corner of my head that I dozed off without knowing. Millie woke me up when she came at 6 o'clock. I woke in a hurry as I thought I was late. She told me briefly what she had been doing the whole day and that the transfer of both children had been granted. She had also some forms that said they were to start school in St. Teresa's in STDs 2 and 3. So the only thing that remained was to bring the children. I gave her a fake story of my day's movements, and the only true part was about the borrowing of a car. I told her I would bring the children that night any time, and then I prepared to go. I could see she was delighted, but I couldn't see the reason why. Under the pillow I counted 10 100-shilling notes and put them in my pocket. I told her to take care of the rest. I then took my gun and set off for Ofafa, Jericho, where Muneen, the owner of the Volkswagen I was going to borrow, had an apartment. It had grown dark by the time I reached there, and the street lights were shining brightly. I was still wearing my hat and my raincoat even though the rain had stopped. The car was parked outside his house and I passed it as I went to knock at the door. It was not new when he bought it, but the owner, a certain European, had taken great care of it. Munin also serviced it well. The door opened and Munin's wife welcomed me. Her husband was not there but had left the car keys with the information that if I arrived I should take it. She tried to persuade me to have supper but I refused as I was late. It was around 7:30 and by that time I had planned to be somewhere near Murange. The tank was full so I didn't need to buy petrol. I passed Broadway stores at Ruarica around 8 accelerating the Volkswagen to its maximum speed. The car could run all right but not as fast as I wanted it to. As it struck 9 I was refilling the tank at a Total petrol station in Murange. From there it was a short journey, about 15 miles, to KIRIAMITI. At the post office I was stopped by a policeman who nonetheless didn't check anything. He only asked me where I was going. Another cop appeared from behind the post office building. The one who had stopped me now let me go. It had started raining as I crossed Mathioya River and I knew I would go through a tough time as the road was normally muddy. At Niakioy 2 buses were stuck in the mud, one was right across the road. The only passengers were 3 turnboys and a driver in each bus. I guess the passengers must have set off on foot to the town as it was about 7 miles away. I got out of my car with my torch and went to talk to the occupants of the buses. They showed me a route that had been made by small vehicles through a garden planted with maize. It was a tough place to pass and at first I feared I would too get stuck but I didn't. My Volkswagen twisted from left to right, sometimes roaring, the rear wheels going round and sliding on the ground. I reversed it a little and when I engaged the top gear the car skidded right and left several times. Finally I got to the road on the other side. I stopped to light a cigarette. I smiled as I started off again. The road was tough all right but I managed it at a speed of 10 miles an hour. At Kalaru all was quiet but some yards from the shopping center, at a place called Ikanjuru, a bus and a lorry loaded with bananas to the top were stuck in the mud. I found a way by the side and I used it. At the junction I decided to follow the road through Gateway Market as it was the one to my home. It was tougher than the one before but at a slow speed I managed it. I arrived at Puita shopping center at around 11 and within 5 minutes I was hooting outside my home. Mother had just gone to bed as she told me later and she woke up as soon as she heard the hoot. She was very glad to see me. My father was not there. But then he was rarely at home except during the holidays. His school was 40 miles away. My other brothers and sisters woke up to greet me and I chatted with them a little. The only ones who were not there were the very children I had gone for. I told Mummy to wake them up and dress them as soon as possible. She got surprised but was too smart to start asking questions. She dressed them as fast as she could and when they were ready she said so. I am going with these two. I have prepared everything for them and the day after tomorrow they will join St. Teresa's school. Do you have any objections? Why should I object? I guess you know what you are doing, she answered. By the way, which classes are they in? I told the school that Wamboi is in STD 3 and Richard in STD 2. They are in STD 4 and STD 3 respectively. I am sorry, I had to make them repeat their classes. Well, it's all right. That doesn't make any difference. A few more minutes and I told my mother that she should let us go. She tried to persuade me to spend the night there but I had enough reasons to object to her requests. We all walked to the car, about 7 yards from the house. I put both children in the front seat and I took the driver's seat and started the engine. I reversed the car and turned it, ready to go. I then waited for them to come and wish us good luck. When we were through, I released the clutch. The rain had stopped falling but the road was as tough as before. I went through the same hardships but after the struggle we were safely back in Murange town. From there, the road was without much traffic and we drove without any trouble to Wood Street. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning when we arrived. I never saw Millie as happy as she was that day. She didn't even go back to bed. The children were also too delighted to sleep so the only person who went to bed was Zalo. I woke up very late the following morning. Millie and the children were not there, but she had left a note on the table saying that she had gone out to town to buy the children uniforms. I took my breakfast and after dressing up took the car to the owner at New Stanley Hotel. From there I went to Moda's garage. He wasn't there and so I waited for him for over 30 minutes before he came. He was very glad to see me. He opened the garage and I stared at a post office red Volvo instead of the white one. It had some other number plates and another road license. To my surprise I was supplied with its logbook. As I drove it out of the garage to a world of other cars, I was feeling very safe. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'll be as far away from Nairobi as the Volvo will take me, I told myself as I parked the car outside my apartment in Wood Street. When Millie came in the evening she had bought everything the children wanted. They were happier than ever. The problem of the maid was to be solved by my mother, who had promised to bring Millie one as soon as she found her. It was time now for me to get ready to leave Kenya. I had received very many reports from friends all saying how eager the cops were to take me to the gallows. I knew it would take cops only a short time to locate me if I didn't leave soon. I was also aware that it wouldn't be hard for the cops to spot me in one of my trips to and from town. I carefully packed my valuables in a suitcase, including the gun, and took the keys with me. I knew that Millie would never interfere with the box. I left her and the children saying she would hear from me once I was out of the country. I left her weeping. That evening I parked my car outside Haitian's Club and tipped a watchman to keep an eye on it. I did not want it stolen at the 11th hour. I met Ndung, a friend of mine, with George, an acquaintance of mine and a close friend of Ndung's, as they were about to enter the club. They seemed in such haste that they almost did not notice me. One took my left arm and the other my right arm, looking so happy, as if they had met their savior. There was a man in this club who owed me about 1,000 shillings, and as I needed money I wanted to know if he would give me back some of it. I got 500 shillings out of him. I ordered beer for the three of us. While we were drinking we started talking. They had received the news that I had escaped and they told me the police were looking for me everywhere. They told me it was advisable not to stay around Nairobi area. After some minutes Ndung added, "Zalo, I think we better get out of this town for some time, every cop here is looking for us. We were almost arrested a few minutes ago. And George has just stabbed a cop, and if we are caught God knows what will happen to us. The cop could die and the world would fall on us," he concluded seriously. "Where can we go? Which is the best place?" I asked that in order to find out how far they had thought about it. On my part I was glad, for I knew if we three ran out of Kenya, we would easily settle down anywhere. Ndung especially was a very nice boy, but I didn't like George very much. He used to drink too much for my comfort. If you ask me, I would prefer Mombasa. I was there for 2 years and noticed the cops there did not interfere with citizens, unless we go there and start messing up the town, George told us. They then both looked at me as if they wanted me to approve the suggestion, but instead I drained my glass and refilled it, emptying my bottle. Ndung asked me, "What do you suggest, Zalo?" "I think you are in a worse jam if what I think you have done is true. My idea is different and I don't think either of you will approve of it. It is true that I am in a very bad jam, and if I am caught I'd go in for 30 years. My idea is not only to get out of this town, but out of this country as well. I want to go to Congo and spend the rest of my life there. I have only a little capital, but it will push me until I get settled. If you join me, I'd be very glad, because we would join ideas and get settled more easily." I wasn't surprised to hear them jump to the idea. One thing, Ndung liked me as he was one of my gangsters and we had pulled a lot of jobs together. We therefore agreed that we should leave that very night. I could see that they were drunk as they had been drinking the whole day. In resisting arrest, George had stabbed a cop and had run away. At 8, we all entered the car. They told me that none of them would like to go for their clothes as they had enough cash to buy new clothes when we arrived at our destination. I found that rather odd, but I didn't tell them so. As I started the car, I decided that I should not leave Kenya without telling my mother, so instead of driving towards Nakuru, I found my way through Ngara, past Muthaiga police station where the police were getting ready to set a roadblock, then past Broadway stores, then on toward Tika and Mirange. It was about 8:07. I was feeling very tired as I hadn't had enough sleep for a couple of days and the beer I had taken had started taking effect. All the same, behind the steering wheel, I was always sober. The Volvo did far better than the Volkswagen I had the night before, and despite the rain, the mud from Mirange to Thuata did not hamper the Volvo. At Niakioi, in the same place, 2 buses were stuck. Each had not less than 30 passengers who could not leave the buses and set off on foot as they had luggage, and the distance from there to their homes was no joke. Within a few minutes from there we found ourselves in Thuata, but my 2 companions were far from being awake. I told my mother about my plan to leave Kenya for a short period, and I gave her the reasons. I also told her it was one of the reasons I had taken the 2 children to stay with my future wife. She told me that if that was the case she had no objection, but she advised me to take great care of myself. We talked for about an hour, then I asked her to let me go. She bade me goodbye and wished me good luck. I drove from Thuata to Gakindu, some 9 miles away. It was muddy and the road was at its worst, and before we reached Gakindu I had sweated it out for hours. My boys were still asleep, and I was at times surprised that they never woke up, even at places where the car would enter a hole and then leap into the air. I filled up the tank at Gakindu and the journey from there to Nyeri was easy. Once in Nyeri I took the road to Nakuru. My boys were still asleep. They only woke up when we reached Thompson's Falls. I was very tired. I drove from this to that corner of Nyahururu looking for a lodging. It was then that George noticed where we were and asked me, how come that we reached Nyahururu before Nakuru? He sounded very surprised. Be good and sleep, old boy. If you make me talk you will regret being in a ditch. I was now on the road towards Nakuru, as I had decided that at Nyahururu there was not a good lodging that was not occupied. The hotels were opening as we reached Nakuru. I parked the Volvo outside Amigos Hotel facing the road. Even in angle parkings, I never parked my car straight. I always entered in reverse so that if I wanted the car in a hurry, especially if I was chased, I did not have to reverse the car. I had only to get in and shoot off, leaving the people seeing with their mouths. In the hotel I ordered a glass of milk and swallowed it greedily, hot as it was. Then I went to the bar and persuaded the cashier to sell me 1 bottle of brandy. That too I swallowed greedily. There were 2 male waiters and 3 maids. When they saw the way I was dozing and moving they knew I needed some sleep. They told me there was an empty room and I could use it if I wanted to. I felt tired and sleepy after driving a journey of about 200 miles. My idea was that we would set off for the Uganda border as soon as darkness fell. I had therefore plenty of time to rest. Going upstairs I had to be supported by a maid on each side and a man behind. When we reached the room, they laid me on the bed and instantly I was fast asleep. As I passed out I heard a distant female voice saying, "Never joke with men. Just look at this man and imagine he was the driver." I woke at 3:30, then went to the bathroom and took a bath. After the bath I felt so fine that I could drive 12 good hours non-stop. When I went downstairs, I found Ndungu and George still drinking. They were surrounded by prostitutes on a certain table near a corner, and as I was feeling hungry I did not join them. I went to the hotel and ordered a heavy meal. When I was all right I went back to the bar. The 3 maids came to me and started asking me about the journey which had made me so tired. I gave them satisfactory reasons. I joined my boys who now welcomed me with 2 bottles of beer. I did not want to drink because I knew the driving would be tough. I rejected the introductions they wanted between me and the dames they were with. I told them, I have come here to know anybody, and if I want to know one, not of this class. I meant every word of it. Then things started happening. two men who occupied a table a few yards from ours called one of the girls. As she stood up to go, George reached for her arm and held it. I didn't interfere because I knew he was drunk. Then Ndungu grabbed his arm and told him to let the girl go, for if she wanted him she would come back. 5 minutes passed and the girl still sat with the two men. One of the girls on our table told George to forget her, as the man who just called her was the girl's boyfriend. I wished she had not opened her mouth. George shot off towards the table as if he sprang out of a spray gun. What do you mean by his girlfriend? Is he going to pay all the money I have spent on her? He was speaking so loudly that all the people in the bar looked towards him. He reached for the girl and, seizing her by the neck, pulled her out of the chair she was sitting in. None of the men did anything. I felt so bad that I nearly hit him, but I struggled with my temper and kept cool. The owner of the girl then stood up but was held back by the other. I could see that whoever these two gentlemen were, they were not the cheap type. Even after manhandling the girl, George would not sit. He went back to the man and shouted that if any of them claimed the girl as his, then he should stand up and prove it with fists. I knew it was useless to try to cool him down, because the more you tried to dissuade him, the worse he became. People smartly dressed the way we were ought not to have behaved that way. I knew the only alternative was to leave that bar as soon as possible, because if the other men got annoyed there was sure to be a fight, and when it broke out I would have to take sides. I went and held George by the collar of his tweed coat and told him, "Listen, George, you shouldn't behave that way. What's a woman after all? The time for us to go has come and you have to leave the girl here whether you like it or not. I am going out, and if I start the car before you have arrived, I am going alone, and remember, if you start a fight you'll sweat it out alone. So if you are coming, come. If you are not, goodbye and good luck." Then I turned to Ndungu. "That applies to you too." I did not say anything else but turned and went out. I did not even look behind to see what was happening. I went straight to the car. I opened the car, and once in the driver's seat I inserted the key. As I started the engine I saw them in the veranda running towards me. They knew me too well to think that I was joking. I knew that even the little delay had been caused by them settling their bills. When they took their seats, I moved the car and turned to Kenyatta Avenue. At the door I saw one of the men watching us, and I got a feeling that he was taking our car's registration number. It was not yet time for us to resume the journey. All I wanted was to take George out of that place. I knew there was likely to be trouble. One thing, you already know that I was among the VIPs wanted by the Kenya police, and if a fight broke and police arrested us, we would all sink. I had very many cases waiting for me, and I was not yet ready to plead guilty or not guilty. It was also the reason I had decided to set off for another country. I parked the car outside Tours nightclub, and as there was a boogie we went in. I guessed that a dance would do George some good. I was even toying with the idea of running off without him if he didn't behave himself. As it turned out, we never got the time. Within minutes of our arrival, George was busy talking to two boys we met there. They were so happy together that he even forgot he was drunk. For no reason I started feeling uneasy, and whenever I got such signs there was always trouble ahead. I looked at my watch and saw it was around 5. Within 2 hours we would be off for the Uganda border. Then I saw two men coming towards me, and I knew right away that there was trouble. Surely, the way George had behaved and the way I warned him about my going alone must have made the people suspicious. The two reached me and one said, "Excuse us Mwananke, we would like to have a word with you outside. We are police officers and we have been sent to take you for questioning. It won't take long." I knew it was not a request but an order. I was lucky that I had left my gun in Nairobi. As I ascended the few stairs from the dancing hall, I saw George at the far corner wrestling with two more men. 2 others joined them and he was overpowered. When we got outside I saw Ndungu sitting in a police 999 car parked outside the club. I was ushered into the same car, then I saw one of the men George had quarreled with. I later came to know that one was a police sergeant and the other a constable. By the time George was brought to the car, he had been worked on. But he was still resisting arrest, and whenever he got his hand free, a cop would lose a tooth and one had badly swollen lips. In a fight, George can take two men without any assistance and they would know they were fighting with a man. Now, a trail of trouble started, a trail of sleepless nights too. In the police station we were asked who owned the car and I said I owned it. I was asked whether I wanted it to stay where it was or whether I wanted it brought into the police station, and I said it should be brought to the station. I gave them the keys. I had trusted the Singh who had worked on it. He had also assured me not to fear anything. To look less suspicious I had to take the risk of giving them the keys. They told us that they suspected us of being robbers from Nairobi because of the way we had behaved and that all they wanted was to check whether any of us had a past record or was wanted by the police. So we want your fingerprints. We will send them to the C.R.OS head office in Nairobi. If any one of you is clean we will release him. If you are wanted by the police from any corner of the world, that is where we will take you. Do you agree? We agree, sir, but make sure you don't delay us much. We are from Nairobi all right, but we are not criminals as you suggest. Anyway, we have no objection to our fingerprints being taken. I was the one speaking as the others had been drinking the whole day and it seemed as if the beer they had taken had suddenly started taking effect immediately after our arrest. I said all that because I knew they would take our fingerprints with or without our consent. There was no point in arguing with them anyway. So far they had spoken the truth. They could not take our fingerprints at that time, so we had to wait until morning. We were therefore locked each in his own cell. In my cell, I got busy thinking. I was quite sure that if I didn't do something and my fingerprints got to the CRO, it would no doubt be the end of the road for me. I had so many cases awaiting me that if I was taken back to Nairobi I would run mad. Remember, I had escaped from the law courts only a few days ago. Even the Nakuru police would be thanked by the chief commissioner himself if they got me there. The trouble was, what was I to do? I had money all right, over 3,000 shillings, but where was I to start if I was to get out by bribery? Already the police superintendent in charge of the station knew that 3 people had been arrested and were suspected of being some of the most famous criminals in Kenya, so if one just vanished and the remainder were found guilty, the officer on duty would have it rough. So I ruled out the possibility of bribing. Escaping from the cells without outside help was also out of the question. There was no need of even thinking about it. Had we all been in the same cell we might have risked fighting it out with them, but as it was, each was in his own cell. So I was left with only one alternative. To try as much as I could to spoil my fingerprints. How can it be done? I asked myself. I remembered that some people had told me that after smearing your palms and fingers with ink used for taking fingerprints and then pressing your hand on your head, the lines made by the hair would make a great difference when the prints were taken. But then unless the person taking the prints is blind, how on earth can you do it? They had also told me that if you pressed your palms against your trousers or coat just before the prints are taken they would again be different. But that too stood no chance of passing undetected. So what can I do? Then an idea came to me. I had a razor blade that I had bought to cut a badly broken nail on my left hand, for it pained a lot when touched. I thought if I could scrape off the upper skin on my hands there would be a difference in the prints. I was lucky, for the blade was in my coat and I had it in the cell. It was new and it started doing the job well. Painful as it was, I did not mind it, for it would help me. If it failed I would go in anyway, so it was better to try. It took me hours of pain to complete one hand. When I was through with one I could not hold the razor blade in it. In fact I bled so much that I thought I would faint. I didn't know a hand, hard as it was, could bleed so much. At around 10 my cell was opened and 3 people were thrown in. One was too drunk to realize where he was and he started urinating soon after the door was locked. Luckily 2 of them were the boys and George was talking to at Tours nightclub. They had also been arrested as suspects and they admitted to me that they had committed the crime they had been arrested for. I gave them my story too and then told them about what I was planning to do and what I had already done. They pitied me very much as they realized I must have been standing great pain. I showed them the hand I had already worked on and told them I was unable to do the same to the other. One of them volunteered to help me and he did a very nice job. It was not as painful as the first one and didn't bleed as much either. By midnight they were all asleep except me. The hands were paining too much to allow me to sleep. I only managed to doze in the 11th hour. Early the next morning, tea was brought. Our cells were unlocked and we were told to take a cup each. I could not hold anything as my hands were swollen and were paining too much. So, I sat and watched the others, enjoying their poor breakfast. My two friends had become sober now and they started realizing the fatal mistake they had made. I didn't want to speak with George. I would not even have liked to be near him if I could have helped it. So much trouble lay ahead of us and he was still behaving in a manner that raised suspicion. I didn't even answer any of them when they asked me why I wasn't taking tea. George then joined his two friends and they got busy talking. Someone is bringing us a hell of a lot of trouble because of a mere prostitute, was all he kept repeating. At around 9 that morning, a police inspector came and called us by our names. I had given a false name and was fearing that, if they looked at my driving license, they would prove me a liar and I would look even more suspicious. So far, the police in the station did not regard me with too much suspicion. They knew that I was sober when they arrested us and I was the only one who hadn't resisted arrest in any way. I was the first to be called. I hesitated. They called twice, Richard Mwangi. I instantly remembered that that was supposed to be my name, but instead of answering, I walked around, pretending to be sick. I had washed my hands with cold water so that you could not have easily noticed anything wrong with them. Then I went to the toilet so that they could call another person. I did not want to be the first. They called Ndungu while I was in the toilet. Then an idea came to me. If, while the officer was taking Ndungu's fingerprints, I went and smeared my hands with the ink on the roller, the officer could not detect anything. So, I shot out of the toilet and went to where the ink and roller were. I took the roller and rolled it on each of my hands. I endured the pain. Then I stood by, ready for my turn. When it came, I courageously pretended not to know how fingerprints are taken and I had to stand more pain when each of my fingers was held tightly and pressed on the papers. By the time the officer was through with me, I was sweating all over with pain. I was then taken back and locked in my cell. A chief inspector came to my cell and started questioning me. He wanted to know whether I was really a criminal and if not, who I was and where I worked and if I did not work, what was my business, and so on. From the way the inspector was talking to me, I could tell that he liked me. I guess it was because of the way I was dressed, very smart, and my manner of talking, very polite, and of course, the Volvo outside. Anyway, I told him that I had 2 garages in Nairobi and that I specialized in second-hand cars, that I could even sell him one at a low price. I added that the garages were jointly owned by me and Mota Singh, and he could phone him if he so wished. I deliberately gave him the name of Mota Singh because I knew the Singh would support my yarn if they phoned him. Before we parted, I was sure he was satisfied with my story and we had even become friends. I can talk myself out of anything, if only I am given a chance to. When lunch came, I couldn't eat. My hands minus the skin could not stand anything hot and no spoons are supplied in police stations if you don't know. So, that time too, I merely watched the rest enjoying their lunch. And George was always the first to finish his meal. He either had a lot of experience in police custody, or he was greedy, or most likely, both. For breakfast and lunch, I smoked cigarettes which I had managed to smuggle in. Having cigarettes in police cells depends on the inspector on duty. If he is kind, you'll get any amount you want, if he is unscrupulous, you won't get any. You might even miss lunch. The one on duty right then was a Ludo, with long unbrushed teeth that protruded from his closed lips. He would have preferred a horse to a Kikuyu. Evening came and I could only manage to eat a toast that had been brought for another convict by relatives. The following morning, we were all called. I was sure that the results had come and it was time to prepare for the best or worst. First Ndungyu was called. "Have you a criminal record?" the inspector asked him. "No sir, if you decide to talk in the last minute, it is up to you. All I want you to know is that the head of CID would personally like to see you and this Njoraj. If he doesn't come in person he will send his top men. I am made to understand that you are among the most wanted criminals in Kenya. Do I make myself clear?" He then told us to follow him to an inner room. Nothing concerning me had been said so far and I had started getting hopes. In this room, there were 4 more people. They introduced themselves as a superintendent of police, a chief inspector with CID, and 2 inspectors, also with the CID. The superintendent asked for Ndungyu and Njoraj, who were then given seats further in the corner. I was given mine away from them. The chief inspector I had spoken to the night before entered the room at that moment. He looked at me and smiled, took a seat and faced us. He certainly liked me. My boys were told the same story by the SP. They were to be locked in until either the assistant commissioner of police came or sent his junior officers. They were taken to the cells. By this time, Njoraj had already been charged with causing bodily harm to 2 police officers while resisting arrest. Then when they had gone, the SP turned to me. "Richard Mwangi, you are a good man but in the wrong company. One thing we are going to charge you with is failing to have an identity card, and you are a grown-up. You haven't taken one in your life, have you?" "I haven't, sir." This now was proof enough that they had searched for my fingerprints everywhere without success. "Well, it is nice of you to admit your mistake. Your fingers are clear, but I would ask you to take care you do not join the wrong company. By the way, when we checked your prints we found a lot of sores. Why is this, sir? I suffer from leprosy, even my feet are like that, and my body is sometimes affected, a very strange disease." They pitied me a lot. Not one of them was smiling when I told them that story, and I could see they feared I might infect them. The chief inspector told me that he had checked the story I had given him over the phone, and he was told it was true. They discussed what should be done to me and came to the conclusion that even though the report had said we should all be detained until the ACP came, it was not right to detain an innocent person. If there had been anything wrong with me, I would have tried to resist arrest like the others. I was given the keys to my car and my cash, and the chief inspector came with me as far as where they had parked my car. We talked for about 2 minutes, which to me seemed like 2 days. Then I started my car and set off. Once in town, I went to the post office and bought a money order envelope, put 300 shillings in it and addressed it to the chief inspector. I also wrote him a short note. "Thanks for your much kindness towards me. I am not bribing you as I am already out, but it is just a sign to say that I am much longing to see you once again and very soon. So long. Richard Mwangi." Then I entered my car and headed for the Kenya-Uganda border. I had planned with the others that we would travel at night, but after being released, I did not care what time of day it was. I arrived in Eldoret at around 10:30. From there, I traveled to Bungoma and then reached Malaba. The latter is the border town between Kenya and Uganda. I was stopped and my car searched, checked, and rechecked, but I didn't know what they were looking for. I had never gone to another country, so I had never crossed any borders. In fact, I was following a map I had copied from an atlas. I did not have any travel papers, but I managed to buy my way through. Money can open borders. I reached Torora, went straight to Jinjia and then on to Kampala. I did not stop in the small towns unless it was very necessary. I arrived in Kampala at around 4 and decided that I should spend the rest of the day there, or stay for 2 days if need be. I found my way to Rhino Hotel and found my car a parking space. This hotel was one of the biggest in the town. I had always thought it wise not to use small hotels while driving a stolen car. People in these big hotels are never suspicious, even if one parked a Benz. After all, they are built for them. I entered the hotel and booked a room in the name of Charles Lukindo, a Ugandan I had gone to school with. I had about 6,000 shillings in Ugandan currency, which I had changed from Mota Singh and wished I had asked for more as I had come to like the town. I was sure that wherever I went, no policeman would be suspicious of me. I wouldn't fear them either as I was not wanted here. The only thing that I was to remind myself was that I was Charles Lukindo. But that was not difficult because I never took a name of somebody I did not know. In most cases I used the names of my younger brothers. This always made it easy for me to remember the name I had given. I bought myself a pair of imported shoes, which I liked, as I hadn't seen one of the type before, and that relieved me of 150 shillings. The hotel was also expensive and my bill was running high, so I decided to leave the town on the third day. I had spent 2 nights there and had enjoyed the hotel services. You can rank it with the New Stanley Hotel in Nairobi, or it could be a little bit better. I emptied my pockets of the Ugandan currency by filling up the tank. Then I set off once again, through Masaka, Malaba, Kalaba and reached Kisulu. Kisulu is on the Uganda-Rwanda border. Here a good Samaritan advised me that if I wanted to exchange money, I was to contact some Indians who owned shops there. I also wanted my car serviced as it had already traveled a long distance. After some hours rest, I took off for Kisanayi, which took me about 6 hours. Kisanayi is on the Rwanda-Congo border. It is the town I liked best among all the towns I had passed through on the whole journey. First, it was much easier to change money. Secondly, I noticed that people here were not curious about strangers. And thirdly, people spoke Swahili, which, of course, made me feel better and able to find my way about. I now had Congo currency. I spent 2 days in Kisanayi. The only thing that beat me was that here, they drove on the right. To get used to it was very hard. I would drive for miles keeping right only to find myself suddenly keeping left. Cars from the opposite side would come with their full lights on, to warn me that I was on the wrong side. After 2 days, I prepared to take off for Bukavu, about 280 miles away. This is a large town and very tricky to a stranger, with more layabouts than the rest of the towns through which I had passed. People also seemed to realize quickly that I was a visitor and they would volunteer to guide me in order to rob me. But I was a different type of a stranger. I was not bombed there, but I soon found my way round. Here, I was prepared to stay for a period of time. I got friendly with a girl who was working in a certain bank. I had seen her at a bus stage waiting for a bus in the evening, and I had stopped for her. She entered my Volvo and told me where she was going. The problem was that she spoke French and I spoke English. She also knew some Swahili, but it was very difficult to understand what she was saying. Anyway, we got along very well. She had her own apartment a few miles from the town, but I can't recall the name of the location. I managed to tell her, in Swahili, that I was staying in a lodging and that I was paying a lot of money per day for the bed and the meals I was taking there. So, we agreed that we should go to the hotel and book off, then go to her apartment. I used to wake up early to take her to her place of work and go for her at lunchtime, and then go for her in the evening. My car still had Kenyan registration numbers and I always noticed people staring at us, wherever my car passed them. I was fearing that it might cook some trouble for me, but it didn't. Then I decided it was foolish to stay all day at home, waiting for the time when I would go for my mistress. Once, I tried to stop at the bus stage to see if I could get some fare-paying passengers, and I was surprised at the way they jumped into the car. I did it several times that day, going to the center of the town and back, and even going to further distances. Brother, I had opened a well for drawing francs. I would find myself with a lot of francs. I was making more money with that Matatu business than my mistress was making in a bank. She didn't know until very late in the week what I was doing during the day. She did not comment on the idea, and even if she did, I would not have heeded. During the time I stayed with her, the name Linda was the only one I knew, and she knew me as Albert. I stayed with her for 2 months, and within that time, I had written 3 times to Millie and twice to my mother. I had also sent each the latest photographs I had been taken in Bukavu.